dark haze. Ladies of the night with eyes of red, vampires in the alleys where good men dread, wolfmen howling beneath the pale moon. But justice is coming and coming soon. From saloons to graveyards where evil sleeps, they walk among us. Secrets they keep, nightmare hunters with souls ablaze, cleaning up this town through the dark haze. Cryptids themselves, yet they stand tall against the darkness, answering the call for every lost soul, every whispered prayer. They fight for the light in the midnight air. From saloons to graveyards where evil sleeps, they walk among us. Secrets they keep, nightmare hunters with souls ablaze, cleaning up this town through the dark haze. The night is young, the hunt begins. For against the darkness where hope never ends.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Nightmare Hunters podcast. In the studio with me tonight is Robbie Jed Rains and Kerry Pocket Dog Davis. We're all happy to be here with you guys, and are not so eagerly anticipating the coming snowmageddon that's about to hit most of the Midwest or a big chunk of the United States. So we're hoping everybody out there has laid in a fair share of supplies and got your blankets handy and got your extra blankets on the bed. And yeah, you never know. Yeah, we if we get as much as they're saying, there might be some folks losing power. So hope you guys are prepared. Maybe got like a kerosene heater or something on standby, or a generator. Because this may be the one you may need it. It has been a long while since we've had a truly bad winter. And when I was a kid, we used to get them all the time. So I'm figuring we're due. We are due to get hit pretty hard, because I'm sure Robbie and Doc will agree with us. Every once in a while, Mother Nature just needs to remind us she's in charge.
Mm-hmm.
So, boys, you guys making preps?
Yeah. Like I said, my furnace is getting repaired tomorrow. It decided to go out this week, which is awesome.
That sucks.
But I got my space heater. I got my little space heater right here.
Yep. He'll keep you warm.
He'll keep me warm. He'll snuggle up with me.
That's right. And at least you got wood heat to fall back on.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole reason I did the wood heat on this thing. I put the fireplace in because, dude, this place when we moved in had no other alternate heat source other than the furnace. And I was like,
and out in Colorado, where the weather can turn ugly at the drop of a hat. Yeah. Well, that's one thing I remember from growing up down in New Mexico when I was a kid. Doc, you've been to Clayton, where I used to live, right there in the foothills of the Rockies, man. When the clouds get dark, you best be getting home.
Yeah,
because the Rockies are unforgiving when it comes to weather patterns.
Yeah, it'll get up on you quick, man, before you even know it. And just like some of the storms there in South Carolina, I mean, that stuff starts coming in on y'all, Robbie, I mean, you ain't got much time.
Well, he lives right off the Appalachians, man. Anytime you live in anywhere in or around a mountain range, weather gets squirrely, and it gets squirrely quick.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this from a safety standpoint. This is just the old safety dude in me. If y'all are going to be out and about on the roads, anything like that, please make sure you have a car kit. Make sure you have some way to stay warm. Please make sure you have extra phone chargers. Make sure they're charged, because cold weather will suck it out of a battery. Make sure you have some way to make heat, some way to get water, have food, signaling, anything like that. A shovel to dig yourself out. Anything, just stay safe, man. And if you have to be out, then be prepared. If you don't have to be out, stay your butt at home.
They used to tell us in New Mexico every winter they'd give out the same warning. They'd tell everybody, make sure you got blankets in your car.
Yes.
Keep like a jug of water in your car.
Yes.
Maybe even an extra coat in your car, just in case you get caught without one. And don't go out of town without a full tank of gas.
Yeah, and Kevin Bodie just said that. And yeah, the full tank of gas. Make sure you got your freaking gloves. Extra socks. Something for your head. Anything like that. Yeah, and like I said, man, if you ain't got to be out, don't. Just stay home.
Mm-hmm. And where I lived in New Mexico, Doc, you've driven through that many times. That is right where the Great Plains and the big rolling prairies meet, right at the base of the mountains. And another big thing they used to tell us, and it doesn't necessarily apply so much like up here in Missouri, but they said if you got stuck in a ditch or got your car conked out on the side of the road out there at night, don't try to walk to the lights, because those might be miles
Lord
away.
No. Yeah, people have died from exposure from that, and you
might be 20 miles away from those lights.
That's right. And if you got, and Josh Dalton has something said, check your generator, Robbie. If you got a generator, make sure you check that sucker. Make sure it's up, make sure it's good to go, make sure it's ready to crank up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just in case you might be walking into cryptid eye shine.
Yeah, especially in that area, dude.
Well, you get out there like anywhere near the Great Divide, you might see the twinkling lights of a town, and it might be 40 miles away.
Yeah, it's extremely, extremely deceptive, man.
Yeah, distances can play a big trick on you out there, especially on the high deserts.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But that's our big safety announcement for the show. Yeah, y'all just make sure you got some preparations in place, because it's one of those situations where you always hope for the best but plan for the worst. And weather is one of those that you had better plan for the worst, because a lot of times the worst case does happen. You don't want to be caught in this without power, without some way to keep yourself warm. Just remember some of those old methods, and last year I had to test one of them out when our power got fried in this house. We built one of those little Amish space heaters with a couple of ceramic planters pots and a tea light underneath it. You'd be surprised how much heat one of those things puts out.
That's pretty cool.
It really did work.
Yeah. That's really cool.
We had one going in the kitchen, one going in the living room, and the two rooms stayed, well, not like super toasty, but you knocked the chill out of the air.
It keep you from freezing to death.
Right.
Faux show.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, folks, speaking of ugly weather, hey, Bobby just gifted.
Thanks, Bobby.
Gifted 5 memberships. Thank you, Bobby. Really appreciate that, and congratulations to anybody that won. But speaking of cold weather, the stories we're going to be discussing tonight take us into the land of cold weather, up into the frozen territories of Alaska. Tonight's show was called Shadows on the Snow, the Alaskan Bush Stalker. And, well, you guys have heard us talk about it before, but Bigfoot in Alaska seems to be almost a breed of its own. It's more aggressive. It's bigger. And even the locals are like, yeah, they're out there. It's really just kind of an accepted part of life, especially among the native tribes up there, because they know that thing is out there and it's extremely dangerous. Yes, we remember we had Fred on the show. Fred talked about it. Some very chilling stories from up there, and it needs to be taken. It needs to be taken seriously anywhere, but in nowhere more so in Alaska, where the Alaskan Triangle has had more people go missing in the last 30 years than any other single place on the planet. Over 60,000 people have gone missing in the Alaskan Triangle in the last 30 years, gone without a trace. Now, yeah, a lot of that could be, bears and other things, because they're certainly up there, and that is some very dense territory. But it makes you wonder that why so many people tend to go missing in that really rough area. Doc, you've been up there, haven't you?
Yeah. We the furthest north I've been. Well, I mean, we went to Elmendorf, but Angie and I went up to Talkeetna, and that's at the confluence of like three rivers. They call it the Three Sisters, the Susitna and some other stuff. But man, you could see Denali, Mount McKinley and everything. You can see those mountains right there out in the distance, but desolate. I mean, it's rugged territory, and it'll get you if you're not prepared. It'll get you.
Absolutely. Well, one thing we can definitely say about is that is in the frozen silence of northern Alaska, something is walking. The interior doesn't whisper, it doesn't warn, it doesn't even breathe. Out there, winter swallows sound whole. A single footstep can carry for miles across the snow. In fact, there's a report of one village in Alaska where it got to like 40 below zero, and they could hear full conversations going on in a town 20 miles away. Sound carries very differently in extreme cold. But yet the thing that people see in the tree lines, that thing stands taller than any man, broader than any bear, and it moves without making a sound at all, which is really bizarre. But in the deep cold, where the air burns your lungs and the sky hangs low, colorless, something walks between the spruce trunks, slowly, deliberately, and it's watching. It leaves tracks the size of dinner plates pressed deep into the untouched snow until they suddenly stop, mid-stride, as if the creature just stepped out of existence. Hunters feel it pacing them from the ridgeline. Trappers hear it circling their cabins long after the fire dies down. Snow machiners see it crossing frozen rivers in three impossible strides, and every witness says the same thing. It shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be that big, and it shouldn't be that quiet. Tonight, we follow the North Trail into the white void of the Alaskan Interior, where 9 encounters over 5 decades point to a single truth. Something massive walks the winter. Something that knows the cold better than we ever will. Something that watches from the tree line, waiting for the world to go silent. This is the Nightmare Hunters podcast, and these are the shadows on the snow. Doc, you want to take us into the Yukon River cabin, Stalker?
Be happy to. So this happened back in the 1970s. The Yukon River in the winter is a world that barely feels real. The sky hangs low and colorless, and the air is so cold it'll actually turn your breath into crystals before it leaves your lips. The spruce forests stand black and silent. They're heavy branches with standing heavy with hoarfrost. And in the early 1970s, a trapper named Elias Mercer worked a line nearly 40 miles upriver from the nearest settlement. It was a place where the only sounds were the crack of the ice and the distant groan of the river shifting under its frozen shell. Now, this encounter is drawn from a 1970s interior of Alaska trapper accounts recorded in regional oral histories. Elias was a quiet man. He was the kind of man who preferred the company of the land to the company of people. He built his cabin himself. It was a single-room affair, a little structure of thick logs, a small iron stove, and a narrow bunk tucked against the far wall. It wasn't much, but it was warm, and it was his, and in the interior, warmth was life. Now, on the first night, the cold was so deep it felt like the world was holding its breath, and Elias had banked the fire low and was drifting towards sleep when he heard something outside. It was a sound so faint, he almost dismissed it as if the snow was settling. It was a single heavy footstep, and then another. It was slow and it was deliberate. It wasn't the 4-beat pattern of a moose or the crunch and shuffle of a bear. It was 2 steps, a pause, and 2 more steps. And this pacing behavior is consistent with multiple trapper and hunter reports documented in those Alaska wilderness encounter interviews. Now, he sat up. His heart was pumping out of his chest nearby. He listened. The footsteps started circling around the cabin, moving with a strange, measured rhythm. It wasn't stalking and it wasn't rushing, but it was just pacing. It was almost like the thing outside was walking the perimeter to test the boundaries of that little bitty island of warmth in the frozen dark. Now, he reached for his rifle, but he didn't open the door. Out here, you don't open the door at night unless you absolutely have to. And the pacing continued for almost an hour, and then as quickly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was the worst part. By the next morning, the temperature had dropped another 20 degrees, and he stepped outside. His breath was steaming, and he scanned the snow, looking around. And at first, he didn't see anything unusual, just wind-scoured, crust, snow and the faint marks of his own boots from the day before. But then he saw them. Massive tracks. Each one was nearly 18 inches long, pressed into the snowpack. The stride was long, way too long for a man, too long for a bear. So have y'all heard that before? The print circled the cabin in a wide arc and then led off toward the tree line. Now, track descriptions of this size and depth appear in those Alaska Trapper Association Oral Histories and Wilderness Encounter compilations. Now, Elias followed that for nearly 50 yards before they just stopped. No fade out, no change in the texture, just one final print and then nothing. This track termination, that's called a track termination phenomenon, is referenced in multiple accounts. It's almost as if the creature had stepped in there and just poof, vanished. And then that night, the pacing returned. This time he stayed awake. He's sitting by the stove with a rifle across his knees. The footsteps are heavier now. They actually got closer. So he could hear that snow compressing under enormous weight. It's like when you hear that snow crunching and compacting. Once something brushed the corner of the cabin, it was almost like it was a soft, deliberate contact, like a hand or a shoulder testing the stability of the structure. Elias didn't move. He didn't breathe. He didn't even dare look out the window. Now, the pacing this time lasted a little bit longer, 2 hours, maybe even a little bit more. On the third night, it escalated. The footsteps came in from the tree line just after dusk, and Elias heard them long before they reached the cabin. It was a slow, rhythmic crunching sound that grew louder, heavier, and more purposeful. The creature circled once and then twice and then stopped directly outside the door, and there was nothing but silence. Then a sound Elias would never forget. It was a slow, deep exhale, so heavy that it actually rattled the frost on the window pane. Now, breathing encounters of this type also appear in those interviews and those stalking reports from the Northern Alaska compilations. And it wasn't a growl. Excuse me. It wasn't a snort. It was just a breath. It was measured and controlled, just like somebody or something enormous was standing out there inches away, listening to the heartbeat inside. He raised his rifle, but his hands were shaking, and he didn't open the door, didn't dare. The creature stayed there for nearly 10 minutes, just breathing, just standing there, doing nothing. And then it walked away. Each step away was deliberate, unhurried, and confident. It had no place to be in a hurry. By dawn, the tracks were there again, and they ended again abruptly in the tree line. He decided he was going to break camp that morning. He didn't finish his line, and he didn't look back, and he never, ever returned to that cabin. I don't think I would either.
That's pretty impressive if a trapper gives up his trap line.
Yeah, and you think about this. Every night, it was almost like that thing was getting closer and closer and closer and testing the boundaries. What do y'all think the fourth night would have been?
It probably would have come in.
It probably would have tested that door and would have turned it into kindling. That's pretty freaking cool right there. Yeah.
What do you guys think of that?
I mean, it's consistent.
I think it went up a tree.
Yeah.
Or backtracked.
Well, that's scary if it backtracked. I mean, it knew he was out there and it was watching him.
It was probably behind him.
Man, at least he didn't hear anything like settling on the roof of his cabin. Good Lord, could you imagine? Yeah. I mean, the track size and the depth. I mean, that's all been well documented up there. the stride length. I mean, what have we heard from all these other stories up in the Pacific Northwest and the stories we've been talking about on the show? They're all much longer than a man, you know, and Robbie being from having the tracking background, being the expert tracker that he is, I mean, ain't no human print 18 inches long.
Right, and that also adds credence to the it can't possibly be a hoax, because no dude in a suit is going to have a 6-foot stride.
Yeah, and dude, if you're going to be hoaxing, you really want to do some hoaxing to be out there in that kind of weather, in that
40 below,
yeah, and then your tracks just disappear. I mean, even if it was something hoaxing, there'd still have to be other tracks there for them to have, extracted themselves. And so, and like, Dorothy Way brings up a good point. The majority of these encounters say they make a beeline for the tree line, and they do.
That's their element.
Yeah, that's where they stay. That's where they stay hidden. If they're in a little clearing, they're exposed, and I don't know. It's as something as, and we've talked about this too, as big as it is, how's it so quiet?
Well, that's soft foot theory.
Yep.
That and walking quietly is a skill that can be learned.
True.
I mean, the Native Americans taught the early trappers to walk, how to place their foot and roll it down instead of just stomp your foot down all at once, because it cuts down on leaf noise and everything else. So, if that's a skill you can learn, then other things can learn it too. Especially something born in that element.
Yeah, and Chris RT's got a good scientific question. I know this might not be able to be explained or can't be explained, but I'm always wondering how they don't get frostbite in those environments.
Well, it's like horses. You can ride a horse through a frozen stream, and it's cold, but it doesn't really bother them. I mean, unless you've got the horse rolling in the stream, it's probably not gonna affect it. Deer cross frozen streams. Birds, they say birds have no nerve endings in their feet, so they can perch on something frozen and it doesn't bother them at all. It's just being adapted to its environment.
Yeah, and I also wonder what's their internal temperature, because like a dog is at 102, I think, something like that. I'm not a veterinarian, but I think their normal body temperature is like 102, and yeah.
Speaking of dogs and body temperature, mine's giving me a dirty look because I forgot to turn on the space heater. Hang on a second.
You forgot to turn on my heater, human. Robbie, what do you think, man?
I think they're probably homeothermic, and they hold a temperature.
There you go, Goofus.
Above what's out there. I mean, it'd have to be. I mean, just like whales have, and seals and things like that have that layer of blubber to protect them swimming in the subarctic temperatures of the water. Probably they have the fur that they have is probably a lot denser than what would be something down here, because they need it.
They may have a double coat like the Huskies or German Shepherds, because those sled dogs, what are they, Malamutes or whatever?
Mm-hmm. Malamutes, Huskies, things like that. Yeah.
I mean, those things, they're like out in the snow, just sitting there covered up with snow like a big old sugar cookie, like, what's up? And you're like, dude, it's 30 below out here. And you're like, and?
Robbie, remember those prints that were on my car, how oily they were? If they've got a thicker layer of skin oil than, say, we do, because we shower and wash a lot of that off, but if they've got a natural thick layer of skin oil, that would prevent a lot of like ice from crystallizing and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And if they did have to had to cross a body of water or something like that, it would aid that water just shedding off, and it wouldn't stay on their skin.
Like that old saying, Robbie, the water off a duck's back is because they got all that oil.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's hydrophobic, honestly.
They're bred to and perfectly adapted to their environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and in that area, I mean, and we've talked about this, and Fred said it. They're, like you said, they're a different breed. Up there, they seem to also be a lot more aggressive. because of the desolate environment. And so that's the reason I think on the fourth night, I think that would have made entry.
I think he was going to be gnawing on a femur bone sitting by the fire.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, out in chat, have any of y'all ever heard anything, any kind of footsteps outside a campsite pacing around that didn't sound like a deer or didn't sound like a coon or a bobcat or a squirrel or a rabbit, something at nighttime? Have any of y'all ever heard anything moving around that didn't match what was in your area? I'm just curious. Because I haven't. I know that night when we were in Joe Bald and Robbie and I heard that whatever it was bipedal, dude.
Well, what crossed the river up river from us was bipedal.
Yeah.
You could hear it.
Yeah.
Because the river up that way gets fairly deep, and you could hear the bloosh, bloosh of each footstep.
That's true. Up there, Moon Valley?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You could hear and it wasn't just something like just, because if it was like a deer, it'd just be like one continuous big splash.
As it kind of bounced or leapt across the stream. Yeah. And that was in late January of 25. So about a year ago, that water's cold. Ain't no person crossing that, hoaxing or otherwise.
Man. Yeah, because I remember when Robbie stopped and he was like, "Did you hear that?" And I was like, "Yes."
I did indeed, sir. Click.
Yeah. 458 comes up. Yeah. That was a little pucker factor right there, because it wasn't that far away. I mean, those amplifiers on those headsets work very well. It wasn't that far away.
But the funny thing is had we not been wearing those, we might not have heard it.
Right, no. Because of the rain. Because that rain would have drowned all that sound out.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Pure Blood Lee said, I've been parallel out of the woods one time. Wow. And then, yeah, it's scary, people who camp like that. Do folks, not once, Doc, and I've camped deep in the woods with friends and solo. That's brave. Do folks have sense or a way they attract these things? I don't know. Could it be pheromones?
Maybe. Could be curiosity when they see the light of the fire.
True.
Because the light of a campfire can be seen for long distances.
Or they smell some bacon cooking.
Yeah.
If they smell food cooking, they're like, ooh. What's
You're
this?
Cooking bacon out in the woods, you might attract me.
Yeah, what's this curious odor? I know, right? What's this curious odor? It smells pretty good.
A Bigfoot BLT, bacon, lettuce, and tourist sandwich.
Yeah, bacon, lettuce, and torso. Yeah, man. That's an interesting encounter. Very interesting encounter.
Definitely, and I think you're right. I think it was building up. I think night number 4 might have been the turning point.
I think so too. I think night number 4 would have been a little bit sporty.
Yeah, he probably would have done more than just aimed his gun at the door.
Yeah. He might have went through the door.
But that kind of behavior is not uncommon up there. That's very similar to what Fred said he heard up until they got violent. But also, Fred said they shot through the window at it.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And things got pretty dang sporty after that, as you're like saying, Doc.
I think they take umbrage to getting shot at for some reason.
Yeah.
Who knew? You mean they get ticked off?
Well, he said that one rock sailed right past his head, so probably would have taken his head off if he hadn't ducked.
Well, he said it was the size of a basketball, didn't he? I still remember that.
Yep.
And he said the way it was thrown, there wasn't much curve to it. That it just comes sizzling in like somebody threw a fastball.
Well, he said it made that. He said it cavitated out the water in that creek or that river, that he could see the bottom, like it actually moved the water. Like Moses parting the Red Sea. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
That's a
Oh,
long.
it scared them bad enough. They left a brand new shotgun and never went back for it.
I remember him talking about that.
And up there in that country, you don't leave a gun behind.
No,
That's your lifeline.
absolutely. 150%. Well, where are we going to next?
Well, Elias Mercer's encounter wasn't just an isolated event. In fact, the deeper you go into the interior, the more you hear stories like this of something massive watching from the tree line, and sometimes from across the ice. Next, we're going to move up the Koyukuk River, which is incidentally the same river where Fred had his encounter. They had a spring hunting cabin on the Koyukuk, and the hunter who saw the bush stalker standing out in the open watching him. Robbie, do you want to take us through this one?
Sure. Segment 2, the Koyukuk River Hunter, the 1980s. The Koyukuk River in winter is a place where the world feels hollowed out. The cold doesn't just settle, it presses in, filling the spaces between the trees and even the air, even the silence itself. In the early 1980s, a hunter named Raymond Hale was running a late season moose hunt along a frozen slough branching off the Koyukuk. He'd hunted this region for years, knew every bend of the river and every stand of spruce, every place where the ice groaned under shifting currents. This encounter is drawn from the 1980s Koyukuk River Hunter reports documented in regional wilderness interviews. Raymond was a practical man. He didn't scare easily. He'd run into wolves, bears, even the occasional wolverine with more attitude than sense. But nothing in his years on the land prepared him for what he saw that morning. The sun was barely up, a pale washed out glow behind a curtain of thin clouds. The air was still, and it was the kind of stillness that makes every sound feel amplified. Kind of like what you were talking about earlier about how sound travels when it gets cold.
Mm-hmm.
Raymond was glassing the far bank of the slough, scanning for movement when he saw something standing between two spruce trees. At first, he thought it was a moose. The height made sense. The dark shape didn't. The dark shape made sense too, but the posture didn't. The figure was upright, perfectly upright, not hunched, not shifting weight, just standing. Raymond lowered his binoculars, blinked, then raised them again. The figure was still there. It stood at least 8 feet tall, or maybe more. Broad shoulders, long arms that hung lower than any human should. The torso was thick, barrel-like, but the legs were long and straight. It wasn't swaying like a bear. It was sniffing the air. Or it wasn't sniffing the air. It wasn't moving at all. It was watching him. Raymond felt the hair on the back of his neck rise up. He'd been watched by predators before. Wolves sizing him up, bears curious about his scent. But this was different. This felt intentional, calculated, as if the creature was trying to understand him. He slowly lowered binoculars again, and the figure didn't move. The silence was absolute. No wind, no birds, no cracking ice, just the cold and the thing across the slough. Raymond raised his binoculars the third time, and that's when it moved. Not a flinch or a twitch, a smooth, deliberate turn, like a person pivoting on their heel. The creature rotated its entire body in one fluid motion and began walking into the trees. Raymond expected noise, the crunch of snow, the snap of branches, but there was nothing. The creature moved with silence, or with a silence that didn't make any sense for something that size. He watched it disappear into the spruce, swallowed by the shadows. For a long moment, he didn't move. He didn't breathe. He didn't trust what he'd just seen. Finally, he crossed the slough, boots crunching loudly in the brittle snow. When he reached the spot where the creature had stood, he found the tracks, and they were enormous. Each print was nearly 18 inches long, with a stride length of 6 feet between steps. The depth of the impression suggested the weight far beyond any human, and heavier than most bears. Raymond followed the tracks into the trees. They continued for about 30 yards, then veered towards a dense stand of spruce. He expected them to continue deeper in the forest. Instead, they just stopped. Just like the Yukon cabin case, the tracks ended abruptly. A final print pressed deep into the snow, followed by untouched crust. No drag marks, no signs of a jump, no disturbance in the snow, just gone. Raymond stood there for a long time, staring at the empty snowfield. He felt exposed, like the creature could be watching him from from anywhere or everywhere. He didn't hunt the rest of the day. He didn't fire a shot. He walked back to his camp, packed up his gear, and left the Koyukuk early. He never returned to that slough.
So, what do you want to bet? Had he looked up, it might have been just looking down on him up in those treetops.
Yep.
I was thinking the same thing, man. I mean, because, okay, so where do these tracks always disappear in these stories? These encounters.
Right
At
next
the tree line. Yeah.
Inside the tree line.
Yeah, so that's where they go on the ground until they can have another mode of conveyance, through the trees.
Well, I kind of disagree with what he said because he said the last print was pressed deeply into the ground. I assume meaning deeper than the rest of them. But then he says no sign of a jump. I think that was a sign of a jump.
That's whenever you said the print was pressed deeply in the ground. That's exactly what
I thought that too. Like it probably crouched down and just went straight up to a branch.
Yep, hunkered down, and just shot up in the air.
Because well, heck, Greg House said he saw one from a standstill, basically jump over an entire ravine.
Good.
Like a standing broad jump.
Yeah, like a standing broad jump. It went over the big wide ditch at the edge of the road, just cleared it.
Man, that's terrifying.
So I think he did see signs of a jump. He just didn't know what he was looking at.
Yeah.
Now, and like Renita Crocker says, but some tracks stop with no trees around. Well, I don't know. I ain't ever seen that.
But we have talked about that. Backtracking.
Yeah, where they backtrack around.
Or backtrack to a spot where they can step off on a rock or climb a tree. Special forces do that. It is a common practice for throwing somebody off your trail. You just very carefully step backward in your own tracks until you reach a point where you can either dip off onto ground that doesn't leave tracks, onto rocks, or scale a tree and drop down for 30, 40 yards in any direction or even farther, a quarter mile away. They might not come back to the ground again for some good distance. Yeah. And at that point, you may never find that trackway again.
I mean, dude, the Native Americans have been backtracking for as long as they've been here, because they learned where they learned it from. They learned it from animals that backtrack.
Exactly. And rabbits do it, bears do it. Yep. There are any number of species will walk back on their own prints to avoid being tracked. It's just to me it's a logical progression to realize that's a survival mechanism, and they teach our special forces how to do it to avoid being followed.
Dr. Sharp has a good question. What if they purposely leave a trail track only to reverse and then follow their own tracks and then backtrack? I mean, that's serious elusive behavior right there.
There are stories from hunters in Alaska who were hunting grizzly who were following tracks and found the tracks just stopped and turned around and that damn thing was behind them.
Yep.
1,000 pounds of pissed off grizzly coming up behind you. Yeah, that is not an uncommon story. People, hunters have said they were tracking a grizzly and the tracks just stopped. And they're trying to figure out where the heck they went and heard a grunt and here it come. It was behind them.
Rabbits will do that to the dogs chasing them. Eventually, if the dog's not smart enough to figure it out, eventually it'll be the rabbit running behind the dog, so the dog running behind the rabbit.
Coons will do that too. They'll throw a dog. They're real good at it. It takes a smart coon dog to track a really smart coon, because they are really good at throwing coon dogs off their tracks. Because the dumb ones get caught.
Dumb ones and the slow ones.
Yeah.
And
all you're doing is improving the lineage of the population by hunting.
Yeah, and especially the slow dumb ones. So,
Northwoods rather deal with 1,000-pound grizzly than 1,000-pound X.
I was waiting for something to come in from him. He was waiting for his. Wow.
So, tracks are consistent. Stride length is consistent, and the tracks disappearing. fits perfectly with what we've talked about them backtracking
And
or going up into a tree.
yeah, and the silence in the manner in which they move, how
Right.
quietly they move. Scary.
And we talked about them standing completely still. The guy just happened to see it while moving with the binoculars. Had he not been using the binoculars and it was standing in the edge of the tree line completely still, it probably just would have looked like a tree trunk. What is it we say, Robbie, about how most deer get shot and when they move?
They move because you don't see them until they move.
How the human eye is acclimated to tracking movement. And if that deer, and I don't know about y'all if you've ever been deer hunting or not, but if you're out in the Ozark woods or the woods or wherever you're at, and that deer is sitting still, it's very, very hard to see.
Yeah, they blend in real well.
Miss LeMay says, folks, if you want to read a good bear story, go to Amazon and check out Robbie Rain's book, Kodiak. You'll love it.
That's true.
And incidentally, that's set up there in Alaska, up in the Kodiak Islands.
That's a great story.
Cajun says, do you think the soles of their feet are padded like an elephant? We discussed that. Yeah, I kind of think they are. That would make sense. That would deaden sound. That would be a perfect adaptation to help keep the sound down. And they say even in Africa, if an elephant doesn't want to make a lot of noise, it doesn't. And that is a massive animal.
Roxanne asked a question today. How tall was the biggest Bigfoot reported up there?
I've heard of sightings where when they refer to those as mountain giant sightings up in the core of Alaska, that there have been sightings up in the mountains of mountain giants in excess of 20 feet.
Good God.
Well, when we had Ron Moorhead on the show, he was talking about when they were up in Alaska, they found and casted. He had pictures of it. They found and casted a 24-inch track with a 12-foot stride.
My Lord.
That's a big. What's that say? You say, Doc? That's a big unit.
That's a big old unit. As Robbie said, that's a big youngin' right there.
Damn right. 24-inch track with a 12-foot stride length.
12-foot stride. So
What made that?
So if there's a 12-footer that's doing a 6-foot stride length, that thing's 18, 20 foot tall.
Yeah. And Ron said it was also pressed into the ground like almost 2.5 inches.
Could you imagine? That blows my freaking mind, dude.
A 24-inch track, 2.5 inches pressed into the ground. That's an animal that probably weighs in excess of a ton.
Just think about when you're watching anything. This could be, but when you see like the videos they show the cage divers with that deep blue, that big 20-something foot great white shark. Just think about how, and that's in the water where you expect things to be bigger,
right?
And that's still amazing. Your mind just cannot comprehend something.
It is, dude. That's like the to the peak of my pole barn out there is 18 foot, and that's hard for me.
Just a guy, yes, they do. The mountain giants typically have less hair. They tend to be leaner, built like how that was described as being built kind of like a basketball player, tall and lean, and also wearing crude furs as clothing and carrying clubs, like usually uprooted trees as clubs.
Good God!
Yeah, the descriptions do coincide a lot with the Kandahar giants.
I think a lot of this stuff is kind of permeated pop culture more than people know. Think about the old Star Trek episode where they're on that planet, which I know they're on planets and all of them, but the one with all the myths and those giants were after them and they was throwing those big spears and had them big clubs. I think that was probably based on something from these giant tales that we've got, because those things were about 15, 16 feet tall, I think.
If I remember correctly, wasn't Roddenberry in the military?
I think he was.
I think I want to say he was Air Force, but he might have been Navy.
me consult the Googles.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think I remember him being in the military, so he might have actually been stationed somewhere where he either heard stories or saw something.
Nick Borer said yes, he was in the military. Hello, little man.
Kay Bauer says, "Wouldn't a 20-foot tall Sasquatch be the length of almost 3 feet?" Well, 24 inches is still a 2 foot long foot. So I don't know. When you start getting something that's that big, I have no idea what the morphology would be like. We can't really base its design off of a human design because it wouldn't make sense for that kind of creature. It might be humanoid.
Just for your trivia knowledge, DA, Roddenberry was a decorated World War II veteran who served in the U.S. Army Air Force. So he was Air Corps.
Dad was in the Army Air Corps. Dad was in the Army Air Corps.
89 combat missions as a B-17 bomber pilot.
Dang!
In the Pacific Theater.
In the Pacific Theater.
Uh-huh.
A lot of those bomber pilots flew out of the Alaskan air bases.
So there you go. I guarantee you some of that stuff was influenced by things that he either heard or saw.
Well, there's also stories of giants in Japan.
Up in the mountains?
Yep. There's even stories of them today. They still talk about, an ancient race of giants that lives in the deep mountains.
Wow. That's cool.
So, that's a pretty cool little side fact that I guarantee you it had something to do with it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of puts 2 and 2 together. Oh, show.
Because that was always one of my favorite episodes of the old Star Trek anyway.
Well, that's
I always thought about Bigfoot when they were on that. I was like, that's what that reminded me of.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Robbie, what is it that we've always talked about in our writing? The best fiction has some truth to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Cajun Dog, Futurama, Death by Snoot Snoot.
Goodness.
So, in this story, stride length, track size consistent with the first story.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I do agree. I think it went up. I think it went upward. I don't think it crossed the Rainbow Bridge or anything like that. I think it either backtracked or went straight up. And I think on night number 4, it was planning on, letting itself in to sit by the fire, if you get what I mean.
Yep.
But here's the thing, DA. Raymond Hale's encounter wasn't the only time something massive crossed paths with people in the interior. The next case that we're going to talk about out of the woods and onto the open road.
Okay.
Is an Alaskan state trooper, and he couldn't explain what stepped out in front of him or in front of his cruiser during a whiteout on the Denali Highway. Segment 3 of the Bush Talker steps into the headlights. You want to?
Yeah, I'll take
3?
that one. But we've got about 5 minutes until we've got to pay some bills. So I'm going to read this. Then we'll take a quick commercial break, and then we'll discuss the story. Sound good?
Yeah. Heck yeah.
All right. The Denali Highway in the wintertime is a place where the world feels stripped down to its bones. It's 200 miles of frozen emptiness, flanked by black spruce and rolling tundra, with nothing but snow drifts and the distant hum of the wind to remind you that the world's still turning. In the early 1990s, an Alaskan state trooper, name withheld on the original account because he was still a state trooper, was patrolling a stretch of that highway during a heavy whiteout. This encounter is taken from a 1990s Alaska State Trooper report referenced in the Wilderness Encounter compilations and regional interviews from Alaska. The visibility was almost non-existent. The trooper described the snow as a wall of white, swirling so thickly that even the cruiser's headlights seemed to be swallowed whole. He was driving slow, scanning for stranded motorists or wildlife on the road. Out there, a single moose can total a vehicle. And I've seen that happen. A car versus moose encounter, moose wins.
Every time.
A single mistake can cost you your life. His heater was humming, the radio crackled with static, and the world outside was just a blur of white and shadow. Then something stepped out into the road. At first, it was just a shape, a dark mass moving through the snow, too large to be a person, too upright to be a bear. The trooper hit the brakes and slid on the icy surface before he came to a stop. The cruiser came to a stop just 20 yards from the creature. The headlights caught it only for a moment, but that moment was burned into that trooper's memory for the rest of his life. The creature was massive, was way taller than the top of the cruiser by at least 2 feet, broad-shouldered, long arms, and upright. And it didn't flinch at the lights, it didn't turn its head, it didn't even react. It just simply kept walking. 3 steps was all it took for it to completely cross the Alaskan Highway. 3 impossibly long strides carried it from one side of the highway to the other. The trooper later estimated that each step covered 6 to 7 feet, maybe more. The creature's movement was smooth, almost like it was gliding, like we've heard that before, despite the uneven snowpack. And the strangest part, it didn't make a sound. No crunch, no thuds, not even the soft hiss of snow being displaced. The trooper sat frozen, hands gripping the wheel, watching the silhouette disappear into the swirling white. He waited for the creature to emerge on the far side of where the headlights reached, but it never did. It was simply gone. After several long seconds, he finally forced himself to get out of the cruiser. Cold hit him like a physical blow, the wind slicing through his uniform. He walked to the spot where the creature had crossed. The snow was already drifting, but the tracks were still visible, and they were enormous. Each plant was at least 18 inches long, with a stride length far beyond human capability. The depth of the impression suggested a creature weighing several hundred pounds, probably more. The trooper followed the tracks to the edge of the road, and they continued for a few yards into the snowfield, and then stopped. Just like the Yukon case, just like the Koyukuk River case, a final print, then untouched snow. No sign of a jump, no disturbance in the snow, no collapse of the crust, no drag marks, just a clean termination of the tracks. The trooper stood there in the whiteout snow stinging his face, staring at the empty field. He later said he felt a sensation he'd never experienced before. Not fear exactly, but a profound sense of being outmatched. Whatever he seen wasn't running, and it wasn't hiding, and it sure wasn't afraid of him. It was simply moving through its territory, completely indifferent to the fact that he was there, indifferent to the cruiser, indifferent to the world. He returned to his vehicle, locked the doors, and radioed in a possible wildlife crossing, although he didn't specify what kind. He never filed a formal report, but he told the story years later off the record to a researcher compiling wilderness accounts and testimonies, and he never drove that stretch of Denali Highway alone again. Now, if I recall correctly, Alaskan state troopers don't drive just patrol cars like they do down here. They got to have 4-wheel drives.
Yeah, they had back then. I think they had Blazers.
So he had a big 4-wheel drive Blazer, and for that thing's head to be 2 feet above the top of that Blazer, that's got to put it in the 9 to 10 foot range.
Yeah, because those things.
Because those Blazers set up pretty high.
If it was visiting the 90s, they're probably an OK 5.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The OK 5s, those things were lifted and had like 33s, 35s on them at least.
Boys, we have got to take a quick pause to pay the bills, and we will jump right back into this, talking about this as soon as we get back. So, folks, it's a good time to fill your coffee, stretch your legs, scratch the dog, hit the bathroom, whatever it is you need to do. But we will be back with you in about 5 minutes. So thank you for bearing with us. And this is the Nightmare Hunters Podcast, and we will be right back.
Hey everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Doc Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DA Roberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unexmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unexmedia.com or amazon.com. In a world where monsters still walk the earth, one author dares to face them. From the brutal cryptid horror of the Apex Predator series to the Ozark legends that stalk the night in Lakeview, Man. From the elite warriors of codename Wild Hunt to the relentless investigations of the Nightmare Hunter and the frontier terror of Dark Frontiers. When the Dead Rise, the Ragnarok Rising saga unleashes pure zombie apocalypse fury. And across the stars, war rages in the Lost Legion and Man's Marauders. And in the realm of myth and steel, the world of Vanguard calls to those born for legend. Cryptids, zombies, sci-fi warfare, epic fantasy. This is the universe of D.A. Roberts. The Unex Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Cathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full-spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the Unex Network website at unexnetwork.com. That's unexnetwork.com.
And we are back, folks. Thank you guys for sticking with us. And we are going to jump right back into this. So, boys, what do you think about that? That trooper, yeah, it affected him clearly.
Yeah, I don't think locking his doors would have done much good.
It's like looking out and seeing one walking to you, and you're like slowly rolling the window up and not making eye contact.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that little thin sheet of glass is going to slow it down if it wants you.
I mean, it makes you feel better, you know. But
yeah, it's one of those little psychological things.
But like Robbie said, yeah, you know, or you said, you know, I think it definitely psychologically affected him for sure.
Yeah. So now we've got, similar track size, similar style of movement across 3 decades: the 70s, 80s, and the 90s. Mm-hmm. So. They're consistent stories. They're talking about a similar creature, and I'm willing to bet these individuals probably never met.
Oh, that's probably not.
And the strange circumstances of the tracks just stop it.
Yeah, that's like a common theme here that we're seeing is they're just going away.
Well, it knew it had been seen.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't it, make sure that it wasn't being followed?
Right. That's creepy. That is a creepy thing. What are you doing, boy?
But I tell you, my hat's off to those Alaskan state troopers driving those highways in almost whiteout conditions. Whew.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Well, that's a good way for that thing to hide too. And the fact it came out on the highway, but it may be like the ones we had talked about in Pacific Northwest. Well, it crossed the road because the road was there in its path. You know what I mean? It had to go from one place to another, from point A to point B. So, I mean, we know that's a human space, but again, that was just part of its path that it was going on.
I gotta give that trooper some props. If I was out patrolling by myself and something like that crossed the road in front of me, I don't know that I would have got out of the car. If I'm out there with you guys, you bet your butt I'm going to get out and see what I can find. But by myself, I don't think I'd have got out of the car.
Yeah, I don't know that I would have either. By my lonesome, especially not from the fact of what he saw, but just the fact of the weather conditions out there. He's in a whiteout blizzard, and I'm gonna tell you what, I've been in several whiteout blizzards in my time out here in Colorado, and it ain't nothing I want to be out in. And if I'm in a vehicle, that definitely don't want to get out of my vehicle. You know what I mean?
I've seen them down in New Mexico too, where you can't see your hand out in front of your face, and yeah, that's a day to, as my dad used to say, stay in by the fire.
That's a snow day. That's exactly what we call it. That's your snow day. So, yeah, man. And the whole crossing the highway in 3 strides.
No, that's guaranteed. It's at least a 2-lane highway. So,
yeah.
What's that about? Covering about 20 to 24 feet in 3 strides.
That's 7 to 8 feet per stride. Gone.
That's a big critter.
Hey, definitely ain't a bear.
Yeah.
Definitely ain't a bear. Ooh, you're cold, little man.
I still say these track terminations, them just stopping, they either went up, they backtracked, or they jumped.
Yeah.
Because anything else is bordering on science fiction, and I don't want to go portal, because where else in nature does that happen? I'm not saying portals don't exist. I'm not saying that's completely impossible, but that it's highly, highly improbable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there's literally no example anywhere in the animal kingdom of anything else that can do it. Yet the Bigfoot itself does have characteristics of both humanoids and primates. So it's either like us or it's like nothing else.
Right.
Yeah, you can't have both.
Right.
Exactly. Well, as creepy as that is, the physical evidence these things leaving behind, some of the clearest tracks ever documented are up in the next case, that they're so massive and so deep that even seasoned veteran Alaskans couldn't even explain them. So in 2004, we're heading up to Fairbanks, Alaska, where a homeowner woke up to find something and walked right up to his window. Robbie, that sound familiar?
Uh-huh.
and then vanish in the snow. So let's talk about Fairbanks. In the midwinter, Fairbanks is a world of extremes. The snow doesn't just settle, it invades. It seeps through walls, through windows, through the seams of gloves and boots. The air is so sharp and cold, it feels like it actually could cut skin. Now, in January of 2004, a homeowner named Daniel Rourke awoke to a morning that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Now, this encounter is drawn from early 2000s Fairbanks area homeowner reports that documented regional interviews and wilderness encounter compilations as well. He lived on the outskirts of Fairbanks where the houses thin out and the spruce forest begins. His property backed up to a stretch of dense timber where moose wandered through yards, and occasionally you have a little bear leaving tracks in the spring mud. But what he found that morning wasn't a moose, and it definitely wasn't a bear. It was something else. Now, his day began like any other. The sun hadn't come up yet, and in January it barely does. I went up there in November And I think it was like 11 o'clock before it got full daylight. So it was crazy. The world outside has a dim blue twilight, and it makes everything look frozen in time. Daniel stepped out on his porch to start his truck, his breath steaming in the air, and that's when he saw the tracks. They began at the tree line. It's a straight, deep line of impressions in the snow. Big trackway, each one spaced far apart, way too far for a human, and too far for any known animal in that region. And the prints were huge. They were enormous, nearly 18 inches long, with a clear heel strike and a broad forefoot. Now, Daniel followed them with his eyes, and his heart was starting to pound. And the tracks made his heart pound even harder when he saw that the tracks led directly towards his house. Not around it, not past it, but to it. Now, excuse me, he stepped off the porch, his boots crunching loudly in the brittle snow, and he walked towards the nearest print. The depth of it was shocking. It was way deeper than his own boots sank, despite him weighing nearly 200 pounds. Whatever made these tracks was very, very heavy. He followed the trail around the side of the house. His breath was fogging up in the frigid air, and the prints continued on in a straight, purposeful line right up to his living room window. Holy crap. Daniel stopped dead in his tracks. The final print was only a foot from the wall. Now, there was snow that was disturbed beneath the window like something had stood there for a long time, and long enough to compress the snow into a smooth, hard surface. Now, he looked at the window, and frost clung to the glass in delicate patterns, and beneath the frost, he could see something else, and it was a smear. It was a faint, wide smear across the lower portion of the window, as if something had pressed against it. Not a handprint and not a face, just a broad, indistinct patch where the frost had melted and refrozen. So something had pressed up against that glass, smashing up against it. Now, he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ambient temperature. He backed away slowly. His eyes were scanning the tree line, and the forest was silent. It was too silent. And even in the winter, there should have been the distant crack of ice, the whisper of wind through the branches, but the world felt held, like it was waiting. He forced himself to follow those tracks back towards the trees, and they retraced their path exactly. No wandering, no hesitation. The creature walked straight to his window, stood there, and then walked straight back. Does that scare anybody? So, halfway to the tree line, what happened? What happened to those tracks, y'all think? They ended. Gone. What I always say, like a fart in the wind. Just like the Yukon cabin case, just like the Koyukuk River encounter, just like Denali. A final print, untouched snow. Just a clean termination. He stood there at the empty snowfield, feeling the weight of the forest pressing in around him, and he said he later felt watched. Not from the ground, but from above, as if something was observing him from a vantage point he could not see. So he went back inside, locked every door, and didn't leave the house the rest of the day. That's a good call. He didn't call the police. He didn't tell his neighbors, and he didn't want to be dismissed as crazy, which is why most people don't tell their stories. They don't tell their encounters. But he did recount his encounter several years later to a researcher collecting winter encounter testimonies, albeit he did it quietly. He never slept in that house again without the curtains drawn.
Can't say that I blame him.
I can't say that I blame. You got a pervy Bigfoot out there, little peeping Tom.
I wanted to address this comment real quick. Cajun Dog says, DA, what if Bigfoot is a branch that went in a different direction? That's entirely possible. We don't know because we don't have one to study. So it's just anybody's guess. However, I can, with a high degree of confidence, state that if this is a species that had that kind of ability, it has hands, it has reasoning ability, it's upright walking. If that species has that kind of ability, it would be the dominant species on the planet.
Dude, that is terrifying to think about that. And the fact that it moved from the tree line to his window and stood there, and there was no meandering around or circling in his house like that cabin. It went right to his window and right back, and then disappeared.
Just wanted to see what was on the news.
What's for supper tonight, man? And
it was getting a weather update.
Exactly. That was a forecast tonight. Yeah, and the thing that gets me about it is it's just what you had said earlier. You had brought this up. and Robbie had brought it up on his story. The deep impressions, and then it was just gone. And he said he felt like he was being watched from where? And you'd cued in on that. Yeah. Up high, up in the trees. So that's Long Queen's got a good point. I bet that smear was its arm laying on the windowsill, leaning, while it was leaning against the house, kind of just hanging out there, just chilling out. Because if it stood there long enough to kind of compact that snow and bunch it up around the edges, it stood there for a minute. Chew. Man. So obviously quiet, big track size, the depth was huge, up against the window, the track termination, all of those are very familiar to us already from these stories. So, the way the smear was on the window, that's it would have been funny if there had been like a nose print or like DA, like your car up in Gatlinburg, a hand print.
Yeah, I would like to have known how high that impression was from the ground.
Yeah, that would have been interesting.
Because houses in Alaska tend to be built a little higher off the ground than here because of the sheer amount of snow they get.
Correct, and it allows a little airflow underneath there for a natural insulation instead of them being right down on the frozen ground.
Right.
Would have been funny if there'd have been a on the window and a little heart sign or something on there.
Or like we used to do when we were kids, you take the heel of your hand and put it on it, and then put the little fingerprints on it so it looks like a baby footprint. There's a series of those going up the glass.
That would have been hilarious, man. That would have been hilarious.
We used to do that all the time when we were kids, and make that little, because it looks like a baby's footprint, especially when you put your fingertips right at the end of it.
It really does. Yeah, that's creepy stuff, man. I mean, and I think what makes it even creepier to me, it's a creepy encounter, but the fact that there was no divergence from its path. It just up to the window, stayed there, went back, followed the same track line.
Nick Borrow says, have you guys ever went out and just did an African gorilla call to see what happens? That's a pretty good idea. Although there was a time down by Lake of the Ozarks when there was some buddies of mine in camping, and I did we were talking about different things that we watched on TV, and I talked about the chimp documentaries, and I was making all kinds of crazy chimp noises, and we had something throwing rocks at our tent that night. Could be unrelated, could have been another camper, but we did have something weird happen after I made chimp noises, so we might try that.
Robbie's like, I do it.
Robbie do it. Robbie don't care.
No,
he'll do it. Oh man,
Robbie, there's a Bigfoot. Let's see if we can cuff him.
You about to ride the light then, squat.
He's going to get a little dose of the Edison medicine.
Exactly.
What'd Pepper say in Cowboy Way? I'd do it just to see what it looks like.
That is a classic movie. Classic movie. Oh my goodness.
I'm definitely more Pepper than I am Sonny, for sure.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
So, again, with this story, we got consistencies that are similar to the other story. And folks, this was a story 3 or 4?
4.
So okay, that's just story number 4. But Daniel's encounter gave us some of the clearest physical evidence in the entire episode. But the next case takes us out of the yard and into the open ice. 2 snowmobilers out on the Tanana River witnessed the bush stalker crossing frozen water in 3 impossible strides. And the Tanana is not a small river. And the tracks it left behind were unlike anything they'd ever seen. And this is where we get a first glimpse at this thing's speed. Doc, you want to tell us about the Tanana?
Yeah.
I just read the last one.
Oh, Doc just did the last one? Okay, yeah. That's right. Robbie, it's all yours then, brother.
The Tanana River ice crossing, late 2000s. The Tanana River in winter is a frozen highway, a broad, wide expanse stretching for miles. Its surface cracked and groaning under the shifting pressure of the ice below. Snow machines use it to travel between remote cabins, hunting grounds, and small settlements. It's open, exposed, and brutally cold. In the late 2000s, two snow machines, snow machiners, excuse me, didn't know that was an actual term, Kyle Jensen and Mark O'Leary were traveling a stretch of the Tanana River on a clear, bitterly cold afternoon when they witnessed something that neither of them could explain. This encounter is drawn from the late 2000s snow machiner reports documented in Interior Alaska winter travel interviews and wilderness encounter compilations. The day started normally. The sky was pale, washed out blue. The air was so cold it made the engine sound sharper and more metallic. The river stretched ahead of them like a frozen runway. Kyle was in the lead, and Mark was trailing behind about 30 yards. They were cruising at a steady pace, scanning the riverbank for wildlife. Moose sometimes wandered on the ice. Wolves followed the herds, and bears were rare in winter, but not impossible. About halfway through the run, Kyle slowed suddenly. Mark eased off the throttle, confused, until he saw what Kyle was staring at. A dark figure was crossing the river ahead of them. At first, Mark thought it was a moose. The size made sense, the dark coloration made sense, but the movements didn't. The figure was upright, it wasn't hunched, and it wasn't lumbering, but it was walking. And it was moving fast. Kyle killed his engine, and Mark did the same. The sudden silence was jarring, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. The only sound was the distant crack of ice shifting beneath the frozen surface. The figure was about 100 yards ahead of them, striding across the river with long, powerful steps. It didn't slip, it didn't hesitate, and it didn't seem to be bothered by the uneven terrain or the patches of wind-polished ice. Mark later said it moved like it knew exactly where to put its feet. The creature covered the distance in 3 enormous strides, each one spanning nearly 7 feet. Its arms swung low, its posture steady and balanced. It didn't even look at the snow machines. It didn't react to the engine shutting off. It simply crossed the river as if they weren't even there. Kyle whispered, "What the hell was that?" Mark didn't answer, but he couldn't. The creature reached the far bank and stepped into the tree line and never broke stride. It didn't slow down. It just vanished into the spruce as smoothly as it appeared. The two men sat frozen for several seconds before Kyle finally revved his engine and drove towards the crossing point. Mark followed, heart pounding. When they reached the spot where the creature had walked in, they found the tracks. They were enormous. Each print was nearly 18 inches long and a stride length of 6 to 7 feet. The impressions were deep, far deeper than the tracks left by the snow machines. The snow machine boots as they stepped off the machines. Kyle crouched beside one of the prints, running his gloved hand along the edge. The snow was compacted in a way that suggested immense weight, hundreds of pounds, maybe more. Mark followed the tracks toward the tree line, and they continued for about 20 yards and then just stopped. Like in the Yukon cabin case, like in the Koyukuk River encounter, like on the Denali Highway, and just like the Fairbanks window case. A final print, then untouched snow. No sign of a jump, no disturbance, no collapsed crust, just clean termination. Mark felt a chill crawl up his spine, and he scanned the tree line, half expecting the creature just to reappear, but the forest was silent, still, and watching. Kyle stood up slowly. "We need to go," he said. They didn't argue. They didn't take pictures. They didn't investigate further. They got back on their machines and rode hard until they reached the next settlement. Neither man returned to that stretch of river again.
The tracks disappeared once it got into the tree line. It was up and it was watching them.
I'm going to tell you something. Ain't no way I'd have turned my motor off. Ain't no way that engine would have been shut down, son.
Doc out there on a snowmobile, he's like, I know how this story ends.
Bro, all you do then is hear me going, brr, 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 and I see something going like this coming towards me. You know what I mean? That's all I see.
Doc says, when to go, I'm when to gone.
Exactly. That's it. That'd be my luck, you know. Screw that. Hey, no. Yeah, every time I hear snowmobile, Snowmobile, Snow Machine. I hear the song. I'm just a love machine. Yeah, from Cheech and Chong. Just a love machine. Yeah, dude. Ain't no way I'd be shutting that engine off. Negatron.
He's on the back of the car, man.
Hey, man.
People knocking, but you can't come in.
We are pulled over, man. No, I mean, if that thing crossed that river in 3 strides, and they estimated it, that's 21 feet in 3 strides, and then it hit the trees, and then them strides and prints just poof, disappeared.
It makes perfect sense that they use the treetops like highways.
Absolutely. Hard to track them through the trees, man.
That's right. And it would also explain why tracking dogs just go, I don't know.
If they even go.
Yeah, if they even go.
If they even go. Dogs
they might get out of the truck and go, no, I'll be in the truck.
Yeah. Y'all come get me whenever you're ready to go. Give me a biscuit or something.
Dog's like, I'll keep the truck running for you.
Best of luck, y'all. I'll be in the truck.
I'll watch this truck. Make sure y'all are good. Dogs are all like this, Robbie. Yeah, ain't no way. And I mean, as far as that thing, everything, the movement, the compression of the snow, the depth of the tracks, the stride length, everything like that, the way it disappears. I mean, everything is aligning with every single story that we've heard. I mean, and they knew
even the last episode. It lines up with those, and that was on the Yakima Reservation in Washington.
That 100%. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's so many similarities. I mean, it's almost. I mean, you could do a behavioral analysis on these things, and to see how many of these stories end.
Well, that's the whole point of looking at these old stories, is to build a profile of known behaviors.
Well, I mean, you started in the 70s, and now we're in the late 2000s.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's several decades. You know, that's over 3 decades, almost 4 decades that we've been seeing these same type of encounters. So,
well, here's the deal, though. You know that definitely we can rule bear out immediately. One, bears don't cover that kind of distance on 2 feet. They can't make a stride like that. They kind of do a shuffling, like toddler walk on their hind legs. But if that had been a bear out there in that cold, those two would have been on the menu, because a bear out in that kind of cold is looking for food.
Exactly. That's the only reason a bear's out then. Otherwise, they're going to be hibernating. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to point out. He said that it walked without slipping on the ice.
Like it knew where to step.
Like it knew where to step. That is also a good argument for that soft kind of malleable foot pad like an elephant, because that would spread out, just like they used to tell us in the military, Doc. When roads get slick, what do? You let some air out of the tires.
Yep.
That gives it more of a surface area to grip the icy road. Yep. To me, that just it validates our theory that the bottom of its foot has got to be similar to the bottom of an elephant's foot, the way it kind of conforms to what it steps on.
Well, it's like snowshoes. It just, I mean, that's exactly what it works like.
It just spreads it out.
Yeah, that's why you can walk better with snowshoes than you can without them. Because
I've done it. I mean, you walk out there barefooted in your boots or whatever, you're going to post hole. You know, you're going to post hole. But that snowshoe, like Robbie said, that increases your surface area. It's a wider distribution of your weight. And so you just kind of, I'm going to tell you what, those snowshoeing, that'll whoop your tail. Good Lord. That's some exercise.
That and cross country skiing.
Yeah.
That's a workout.
That'll wear your tail out. Well, all these.
Exactly, Cajun. That soft lower layer of the foot morphology spreading out like that would spread its body weight out and give it much better traction.
Correct. So, what time is it? Okay, so we're doing pretty good on the segments.
But But there's 9 of them, so we're still probably going to go past the 2-hour mark.
Yeah. Well, can we tonight?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So do you want me to pick up this next one, DA?
Yeah, Robbie's not feeling real great, so
I just read the last
oh, you just read the last one? That's right.
Yeah, you just read the last one. So
I'm now, if you want to do the lead in, I'll read this one. I think I've only done one so far.
yeah, man. So the Tanana River encounter showed us that it showcased the bush stalker's speed and confidence. I mean, wasn't bothered by these things. The next case brings us back to something that's far more intimate. And this is where a family was staying in a remote cabin, and they saw a massive silhouette standing at the tree line, and it watched them for over an hour. This is where the creature stops moving and simply waits.
And this one's in the 2010s, so just about a decade ago.
Yeah,
the interior.
If you skipped your meds tonight,
What's that?
Miss Lene wants to know if you skipped your meds tonight.
I might have. I'm crazy. Yeah, I never
He
know.
wouldn't remember if he did, Miss Lene.
That's right. I wouldn't.
I don't know,
but
maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But the interior of Alaska in winter is a place where silence becomes a physical thing. It's a weight that settles onto the shoulders, a presence that fills the spaces between the trees. And in the early 2010s, a family of 4, the Harrison family, rented a remote cabin for a winter getaway, hoping for a quiet week of snowshoeing, reading, and disconnecting from the world. The cabin sat at the edge of a dense spruce forest, miles from the nearest road. It was the kind of place where the night sky felt close enough to touch, and the cold crept into your bones no matter how high you stoked the fire. This encounter is drawn from a 2010's Interior Alaskan cabin stay reports that were documented in Alaska and regional interviews and wilderness encounter compilations. The first 2 days were peaceful. The family explored the trails, cooked meals on a wood stove, and watched the northern lights ripple across the sky. The children played in the snow while the parents took photos of the frozen landscape. But on the 3rd evening, everything changed. It began just after dusk. The sky was a deep indigo, the last traces of daylight fading behind the tree line. The family was inside playing cards by lantern light when the youngest child, an 8-year-old named Lily, walked to the window and froze. "Daddy," she whispered, "there's someone outside." Her father, Michael, stood up, expecting to see a moose or maybe a neighbor from another cabin. But when he reached the window, he stopped cold. There was a silhouette standing at the tree line, tall, broad, and motionless. At first, he thought it was a tree, but the shape was wrong, too symmetrical, too upright. And the longer he stared, the more certain he became it was facing the cabin, watching them. Michael told the family to stay away from the windows. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out onto the porch, breath steaming in the frigid air. The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the snow, the trees, and the empty yard. But the silhouette didn't move. It just stood beyond the reach of the flashlight, a dark mass between 2 spruce trunks. Michael felt a chill crawl up his spine. He called out, "Hello? Who's there?" But the figure didn't respond. It didn't flinch. It didn't shift. It didn't breathe visibly in the cold. He backed into the cabin and locked the door. For the next hour, the silhouette remained exactly where it was. The family huddled inside, listening to the crackle of the fire, the faint groan of the cabin settling on the cold. Every few minutes, Michael would peek through the curtains. The figure never moved, not an inch. It was as if it had rooted itself to that spot. But around 10 p.m., something changed. The silhouette shifted. Not a step, not a lunge, but a slow, deliberate turn of the head. Michael saw the movement clearly. The dark shape rotated slightly, as if adjusting its angle to get a better view of the cabin. He felt his stomach drop. The creature wasn't just watching, it was studying them. A few minutes later, it stepped back into the trees. One step, then another, then it was gone. No sound, no crunch of snow, no snapping of branches, just silence. Michael waited several minutes before stepping outside again. The cold hit him like a wall, the air so sharp it burned his lungs. He walked to the tree line, flashlight trembling in his hand. That's when he found the tracks. They were enormous. roughly 18 inches long, spaced far apart, with a depth that suggested immense weight. The stride length was around 6 feet. The tracks led from the forest to the spot where the creature had stood, and then back into the trees. But 20 yards into the forest, the tracks just ended. Just like every other case in this episode, a final print, then untouched snow. No sign of a jump, no disturbance, no collapse of crust, just clean termination. Michael backed away slowly, scanning the forest for movement, but the woods were silent, still, watching. The family left the cabin the next morning. They didn't finish their vacation, and they didn't look back. They told their story years later quietly to a researcher collecting winter encounter testimonies, and they never returned to that cabin.
I can't blame them.
I think that was a case where it was probably drawn in by the sound of the kids playing, and it just watched. And when he followed it into the woods, it was probably looking right down on him.
Yep.
That's 18 inches.
Good God.
I mean, I got really short arms, but yeah, that's still that's big, man. I mean, that puts it in perspective right there. That goes past my freaking elbow. That's insane.
That's a big track.
That's a huge track, dude.
It's a big youngin.
That's a big youngin right there. I mean, how big were those in that track trap there at Combs Ferry that we saw?
Oh, they were probably 14 to 16 feet. They were 14 to 16 inches. They weren't quite that big.
Yeah, I was thinking it was like around 16 too. Yeah, they weren't that big, but dude, 18 inches is freaking insane.
Well,
That's
we've
a big
always
track.
heard that they're bigger up that way. So
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And it just stood there and just stood there checking them out, and then it was gone. So, I mean, if they'd have stayed there, I wonder if it would have done what it did at that other guy's cabin and made tracks and observed them right there at windows. You know what I mean? If they'd have seen the prints go directly from the tree line to the windows instead of just hanging out in the tree line, guarantee if they'd have stayed there, it would have got closer every night.
yep.
Oh, yeah.
As on the other ones.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But this time, it didn't. One, it knew it was being seen, and it didn't care, but it just stood there. I think that's a little more unnerving than watching it walk.
You creeper. Yeah, that is very creepy, man.
It's just standing there breathing heavy, and all of a sudden a little patrol SUV pulls up, and highway patrolman gets out and serves him with his restraining order.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you doing? Nothing. Mind your own business.
I'm afraid you're going to need to come by the courthouse and register.
Yeah, that thing. And Long Queen, come on, dude. Long Queen said it too. Their feet are like snowshoes. You know what I mean? Because they to distribute their weight better, and so that makes a lot of sense. God, that's
Chris, we were talking about that earlier. We had Ron Moorhead on the show, and they actually casted tracks 24 inches long with what is it? Was a 12 foot stride length.
Yep.
12-foot stride.
Yeah, that's pretty
double
wild.
what we're talking about tonight. Or
That's a big animal.
not double what we've talked about tonight. Double what we talked about. We've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Northwest, it didn't say. Didn't say whether the cabin had an awning or not. But again, we're still seeing a lot of consistency in these stories.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, it's almost like the behavior patterns up there are almost identical.
But like you pointed out earlier, is not only consistency in these stories, but they're consistent with what we read prior.
Correct.
In other episodes.
Correct.
And it's standing there for an hour. That's not typical predator behavior. Wolves will watch you, but they won't sit there for an hour. Bears will watch you, but they won't sit there for an hour. It's just really weird. It takes a lot of patience to just stand there. Robert McGo, thank you. Real appreciate you, dude.
That is a weird encounter. I mean, that's unnerving. Just something just standing there, stock still, not moving, and just watching you for an hour.
But how long will snipers sit and watch?
Forever.
People?
Days.
As long as they need to.
Yeah.
So that puts it on a level of intelligence.
Yeah.
Above what we talked about with other predators.
Yeah. It's like DA said, maybe it was the kids, had drawn it in, hearing the kids' noises, the kids' sounds and everything playing. So yeah, that's
So you guys think it was what it was just watching them, that it was hunting, or just testing boundaries? Gauging their reactions.
I don't know, Robbie. I think maybe it was just intelligence gathering.
Yeah, I think probably with this one, this may have been something like, the other encounters. We kind of picked up. It was seen further into the reconnaissance, for lack of a better term. Maybe this was just witnessed from the very first, where it came in and discovered that there's people in the cabin, and that's where all these encounters, other than the one with the snowmobile and the highway patrolman, but all these at the cabin, maybe they all started it the exact same way and just gradually progressed, over however many days, and they were just caught in different or different points of the reconnaissance.
Yeah, and we've had two different points of observation here. One of them was saying, hey, maybe it was a female had maternal instincts watching the kids. Another one was maybe it was waiting for an opening to go snap up one of the kids until it saw the dad watching back. So up there, I mean, could have been either. I mean, but as we've heard from Fred, they tend to be a little bit more aggressive up there. So maybe they were just waiting. Maybe they were waiting for an open spot. I don't know.
Well, maybe if one of the kids had wandered off into the woods, different story.
Yeah. And maybe it was a female. We don't know. We're hypothesizing. That's what we do here. That's why we like to get y'all involved, and we appreciate the interaction from the chat. That makes the show much more interesting. Okay.
Well, this family's encounter shows us the creature's patience. But the next case takes us even deeper into the wilderness. A group of researchers camping north of the Arctic Circle heard something pacing around their tent all night, and the tracks they found the next morning were unlike anything they'd ever seen. This is where the creature circles back into the story, literally. Doc, you want to take us in?
Yeah, man. So this is the Arctic Circle camp pacing. This is from 2016, so just a few years ago, right? So north of the Arctic Circle, the winter becomes something else entirely. My buddy John was up there working on a contract with oil and gas, and 70 below is a common thing. It's a presence. The winter, the cold, just the temperature, it's a presence. It's a force. It squeezes the world into silence. Excuse me. In 2016, a small research team of 3 graduate students and 1 field supervisor set up a camp in a remote stretch of tundra to collect soil core samples. Soil. That's my Mississippi coming out. Soil core samples. Their work required them to stay overnight in the field far from any settlement with nothing but a canvas tent and a satellite phone between them and the frozen wilderness. Now, this encounter is drawn from the mid-2010s Arctic Circle fieldwork reports. And the team arrived just before dusk, and they pitched their tent, cooked a simple meal, and settled in for the evening. The temperature dropped fast, like from 20 below to nearly 40 below in a matter of hours. Now, the wind died completely, which is a godsend, leaving the world unnervingly still. There's absolutely no noise out there.
God, can you imagine the wind chill at a -40 temperature?
Dude, bro, that's crazy. The wind being died, having died, made it very, very still. And inside the tent, the four researchers were huddled up in their sleeping bags, talking quietly, their breath forming faint clouds in the lantern light. And around midnight, the pacing began. At first, it was just faint, rhythmic compression of snow, so subtle they thought it might be shifting ice beneath the tundra. But the sound started to grow clearer, heavier, and more deliberate. Step, step, pause. Step, step, pause. The cadence was unmistakably bipedal. The team fell silent and no one moved, no one spoke. Wasn't supposed to be anybody out there, right? That was just them. The footsteps circled the tent slowly, each step measured and heavy, and they were following around the tent as it walked around the tent. The snow was that wind-packed and crusted stuff that would have made that crust. It had a crust to it, so anything stepping on it crunched it under the weight. But in this case, the sound was muted, almost controlled. It wasn't as noisy as it was when they walked on it. This kind of deliberate two-legged pacing is referenced in all these reports as well. It completed one slow circle, then another, and they were whispering to themselves, trying to rationalize what it could be. They're researchers, they're scientists. What is this? Is it a bear? No, that's impossible right now. The bears were denning up this time of the year. Was it a moose? Nope. The cadence was all wrong because this was bipedal and the steps were too close together. Was it a person? Absolutely not, because there was no one within 50 miles of their location and they had heard them approaching on some sort of machinery. So the pacing kept on going for hours. The footsteps never sped up. They never slowed down. This thing was just circling and pacing around their tent. And at one point, it stopped directly behind the tent. The air grew even more still than it was, and the silence deepened, almost like it was pressing on them. And then they heard something that froze their blood in the bloodstream. Breathing. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was just a slow, steady, rhythmic breathing. So deep they could feel it through the frozen ground, but it was so controlled it barely made a sound. So they could feel it, but they could barely hear it. And one of the students, Anna, later said it felt like it was standing next to a furnace that wasn't giving off heat. It stood there for nearly 10 minutes, and then the pacing resumed. Step, step, pause. Step, step, pause. The team didn't sleep. They didn't move. They barely breathed. And by the time the first pale light of dawn seeped through that tent fabric, the pacing had stopped. They waited another hour before they unzipped the flap and stepped out in the air. That frigid air hit them. And that world, everything outside was still and silent, except for the tracks that had formed a perfect ring around the tent. Each ring was enormous, almost 18 inches long, spaced far apart, that suggested huge amounts of weight, immense weight, and the stride length was consistent and the pattern was deliberate. And the stride length was far bigger than a human. They followed the tracks outward that led away from the tent, and then it went in a straight line from about 30 yards, and it just stopped, just like every other case in this snow. Final print, then untouched snow, just a clean termination. The researchers packed their gear, left the site immediately, completed their project from a safer location, and reported the incident only informally years later during a series of interviews about unexplained Arctic encounters, and none of them ever camped in that region again.
First off, I wouldn't camp in a tent inside the Arctic Circle because odds are very good you're going to come out of there as a polar bear bowel movement.
Yeah, dude.
But what does that sound eerily familiar to you?
Dyatlov Pass.
Dyatlov. It's exactly what I was thinking. What if the reason it was in there is it was trying to scare them out of the tent. It didn't want to go in after them because they might be armed. But once it scares them out of the tent, the elements do most of the work for it.
It was trying to flush them out, man. Absolutely.
It's exactly what it was doing.
Yeah,
I think that's what happened in Dyatlov. I think it flushed them out.
Yeah, that was creepy. I mean, the way it was, and then when it just stood there breathing on the tent like a creeper, I mean, it's just stopped. And they're like, hey, this thing's outside breathing right here. That's terrifying, dude. Terrifying. Okay, what do we see consistencies with? What are the consistencies?
Track size, the way they just disappeared.
The stride,
quiet.
Yeah, quiet. It's the bipedal pacing. People are knowing that it's bipedal in nature. So all of these things have the same thing. And just like, okay, there's been multiple cabin, stories. It's like the first one we started out with. What did it do? Walked around a cabin. I mean, now this one didn't test the structure, which I'm actually kind of surprised. But if they'd have stayed there the other night, outcome could have been a whole lot different.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine if that'd been the three of us camping out there, we'd heard the first steps going around the tent, and Doc would be like, "I got 2 guns for you, one for each of you."
That tent would have been well ventilated. Did somebody just open up the tent fly? No, that's Doc. He's shooting again. Yeah, and the whole. I mean, this is, something's out there. You know it's out there because it's walking around you. It's big. It's heavy. It's stomping around. I mean, how that'll mess with a person's mind right there.
Yeah, it will.
That'll interrupt your OODA loop.
That'll definitely disrupt your OODA loop, brother.
That's right.
Observe, orient, decide, and act. So your OODA loop is pretty much screwed-a-looped at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, they were observing, but there wasn't a whole lot of orienting going on.
But thankfully they didn't act.
Yeah, because it is. It's like DA said. They were trying to get, that thing was trying to flush them out. And if they had unzipped that tent, it'd have been on like Donkey Kong, man.
I really think, because I was immediately thinking the Dyatlov thing.
Yeah.
It was trying to draw them out of the tent.
Yeah.
There was another story that we read a couple of shows ago. Might have been Drury Mincy, where some people were inside a tent, and walked around a tent, and it did flush them out. But once they got to a certain point,
the weather wasn't as bad. They were able to get to their vehicle fairly quickly. But if they just scattered and went out into the woods and got lost, they'd have been easy pickings.
Yeah, dude. And especially up there,
Yep.
They went back and found the tent shredded, and the game warden was like, probably raccoons.
Yeah, raccoon.
It's just raccoons.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's definitely plausible.
Yeah. I've been in Missouri a long time, and I've seen some pretty big raccoons, but I ain't never seen a 7-footer.
Does that raccoon live near a nuclear power plant? I don't know.
He rides a spaceship with a big tree and
exactly. Yeah, and the Star-Lord.
Yeah, he goes by the name of Rocket.
Yeah.
Hey, well, Star-Lord was from Missouri, if y'all remember.
That's true.
Right.
He was.
Think about that. That's funny. Northwoods, maybe raccoons on meth. That's a good possibility.
Yeah, that's also not shocking in Missouri.
Yeah, pharmaceutically enhanced.
Yeah. So, again, a lot of consistencies in this, though.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and with the, everything we've been seeing, was it curious? Was it assessing? All that kind of stuff. All these stories have so much similarity, and this Arctic Circle encounter with these researchers, this research team showed us that it has patience, right, and territorial behavior. This next case that who wants to read that one? Would that be UDA?
He just read one. It's my turn. I'll take it.
Okay, Robbie. Okay, so this next case brings us back to the deep timber of the interior. And it's where a trapper has been heading out at dawn and saw a massive shape standing between 2 big spruce trees, watching him with an intelligence that felt almost human. So segment 8 is where the creature steps into the light, and then it vanishes without a sound.
The Remote Trapper's Dawn Encounter, 2018. A little closer in time here.
Mm-hmm.
Dawn in the interior is a slow and reluctant thing. The sky doesn't brighten so much as it softens, a faint wash of pale blue creeping over the horizon. thought that said revitalizing for a second, revealing the frozen world inch by inch. In 2018, a trapper named Caleb Rudd was working a remote line deep in the spruce forest north of the Tanana River. He'd been running that line for years, long enough to know every bend in the trail, every stand of trees, and every sound the forest made. The encounter is drawn from the late 2010s Interior Alaska trapper reports documented in regional interviews and wilderness encounter compilations. On this particular morning, the cold was brutal, the kind of cold that makes the air feel heavy and it turns every breath into a cloud of crystals. Caleb stepped out of his small trapping cabin just as the first light touched the treetops. The forest was silent. No wind, no birds, no distant cracking of ice, just stillness. He slung his pack over his shoulder and started down the trail, boots crunching softly in the brittle snow. His breath hung in the air behind him like smoke. The world felt suspended, caught between night and day. About a quarter of a mile from the cabin, he stopped. Something felt wrong. Not a sound, not movement, just a shift in the air, a pressure, a presence. Caleb scanned the trees, eyes adjusting to the dim light. At first he saw nothing but the familiar shapes of spruce trunks and snow-laden branches. Then he saw it, a massive figure standing between the two trees, perfectly still and upright, and perfectly silent. The creature was framed by the trunks like a doorway, its shoulders nearly as wide as the gap. Head sloped forward, arms hanging low at its sides. It wasn't hunched like a bear. It was shifting weight, and it wasn't shifting weight like a moose. It was standing like a person, but far too large to be a human. Caleb froze. The creature didn't move, and it didn't flinch. It didn't even react. It was watching him. The early light caught just enough of the outline to reveal its size. Easily 8 to 9 feet tall, with a torso thick and barrel legs that looked impossibly long. Its silhouette was dark against the pale snow, a shape that didn't belong in the natural geometry of the forest. Caleb's first instinct was to reach for his rifle. His second instinct, the one that kept him alive, was not to move at all. He stood there, breath shallow, heart pounding so hard that he could feel it in his fingertips. The creature remained motionless, as if carved from the shadows themselves. This kind of silent, upright observation is referenced in multiple Interior Alaska dawn encounter reports collected in trapper interviews. After what felt like minutes, but was like only seconds, the creature shifted. Not a step and not a lunge, just a subtle tilt of the head as if evaluating him from a different angle. Caleb felt a wave of dread wash over him. This wasn't curiosity, and this wasn't fear. This was assessment. Then, without warning, the creature moved. It stepped backwards into the shadows between the trees. One step, then another, then it was gone. No sound, no crunch of snow, and no snapping branches, just like we've heard all these other encounters. Just absence. Caleb stood frozen, staring at the empty space where the creature had been. The forest felt different now, heavier, darker, as if the presence had left something behind. Finally, he forced himself to move. He walked to the spot where the creature had stood, boots trembling in the snow. That's when he saw the tracks, and they were enormous. Each print was nearly 18 inches long, spaced far apart, with a depth that suggested an immense weight. The stride length was nearly 6 feet, and the tracks led from deeper in the forest to the spot where the creature had stood. But when Caleb followed them back into the trees, they ended abruptly. Just like every other case in this episode. Final print, the untouched snow. No sign of a jump, no disturbance, no collapse or crust, just a clean termination. Caleb backed away slowly, scanning the forest for movement, but the woods were silent, still, and watching. He returned to his cabin, packed his gear, and left the area by midday. He didn't finish his line, and he didn't return that season. He told the story years later, quietly, to a researcher collecting winter encounter testimonies, and he never walked that trail on again.
Boys, we got to take a quick pause to pay the bills. So we'll jump right back in discussing this as soon as we get back. So, folks, we're going to step away for just a minute. If you need to refill your coffee or answer the call of nature or scratch the dog, stoke the fire, whatever y'all need to do, we will be right back in just a minute.
The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unexmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unexmedia.com or amazon.com. The Unex Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Cathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full-spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes, made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the Unex Network website at unexnetwork.com. That's unexnetwork.com.
Hey everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Doc Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DA Roberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
In a world where monsters still walk the earth, one author dares to face them. From the brutal cryptid horror of the Apex Predator series to the Ozark legends that stalk the night in Lakeview Man, from the elite warriors of codename Wild Hunt to the relentless investigations of the Nightmare Hunter and the frontier terror of Dark Frontiers. When the dead rise, the Ragnarok Rising saga unleashes pure zombie apocalypse fury. And across the stars, war rages in the Lost Legion and Man's Marauders. And in the realm of myth and steel, the world of Vanguard calls to those born for legend. Cryptids, zombies, sci-fi warfare, epic fantasy. This is the universe of D.A. Roberts.
And we are back. Thank you folks for sticking with us. And we're going to jump right back into this, boys. That was a pretty creepy story.
It's a very creepy story.
And there wasn't nothing between him but air.
Yeah.
Between him and it.
Air
He wasn't looking out a window. He wasn't looking from a car window. It was across the clearing.
Yeah. And it did exactly what all these other ones have done. It except for this one, what was so creepy to me was the way it maintained eye contact with him and just kind of backed up and disappeared into the shadows.
The Homer Simpson into the foliage.
Exactly. I mean, that's a little bit creepy. That thing's sitting there going, I'm watching you. I'm watching you. I don't know, man. Good Lord. That's a good one. Robbie, what do you think?
I agree with the statement that his first instinct was to shoot, but his second one saved his life, and that was to sit still.
Yeah.
I think if he'd have fired at it, we would never have heard this story.
He'd have been booed. Yeah. That's one of the common themes we've also seen is when somebody
escalates the situation, inevitably it ends badly for them.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, everybody's like, are y'all going out in the woods armed? Well, of course we are. But this is not an offensive thing. The reason we are armed, and you've reiterated this many times, is because it's a defensive thing for us. I mean, dude, what we might encounter something else besides that that's trying to hurt us or someone.
Snakes, mountain lions, bears, meth heads.
Yeah, all of the above. I mean, so there's a high
cannibals.
Yeah, doll houses. Yeah, I mean, there's a high probability of that. But and like you said, I know Robbie agrees with this. I agree with it. If my life's not in danger, I'm not going to be dropping a hammer on one of these things, because man, the consequences there's myriad consequences to that. So I don't want to deal with that stuff. You know what I mean? At all.
Absolutely.
What do you think, Robbie?
Oh, 100% agree. I mean, you know, all these encounters have so many things in common with each other, but it's like you said, Doc. They're all the same until somebody escalates it, and then it always gets worse.
It goes off the rails. Then you got to watch out for your snowmobile, you know, and just things just happen. Who knows? You're carrying a jar of raspberry preserves and some hair trimmers, you know. Yeah.
And DA's packing for dragons, and
damn right.
It's just
always pack for dragons.
It's just a bad day all around, man.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, but the physical characteristics of these things, they're all very similar. I mean, all these prints have been roughly 18 inches. The stride lengths have been identical almost. Everything, you know, the observation, are they intelligence gathering? Are they assessing? Or are they just letting them know they're there? Because, I mean, this dude runs a trap line once a year. That thing lives there all year.
I think this was a warning for him to get out of the area.
Correct. I agree.
It was letting him know, I'm here. You need to be somewhere else.
You're in my AO, buddy. You need to get on out of here. Bye-bye. So, I mean, and this was in 2016, 2018. This was in 2018. So 2 years later than the other encounter. And we're going back to the 70s with almost identical behavior, almost identical characteristics to these encounters.
Right.
Right. And like Northwest Native Tracker, that's why you don't escalate. Absolutely. I mean, I would not ever, unless my life or the life of my two compatriots here were in danger. That's the only time I would be doing anything.
Boondock Mojo says, there's a video on YouTube of a native Alaskan telling a story about hunting in the snow and walking over a polar bear den and collapsing in on top of a mother polar bear with a cub. No, thank you.
Dude, I'd rather just stick my leg into a sausage grinder. You know what I mean?
You pretty much did.
You pretty much did. God almighty, that's terrifying.
It's like falling into a wood chipper.
I was just gonna say, how about let me just nosedive into this wood chipper here. See how that comes out. God almighty. Holy smokes, dude.
Well, we're still seeing a lot of consistencies in these stories.
Yeah.
Over decades.
Yeah, 100%, man.
So Caleb's dawn encounter brings us to our final case. One that takes place not in a cabin, not on a river, not in a tent, but on a winter trail where a cross-country skier realized he wasn't alone. Something followed him for miles. Something that matched his pace perfectly. Something he never saw but always felt the presence of. This is where the bush stalker becomes more than a shadow. The White Mountains of Alaska are a maze of ridges, frozen valleys, and dense spruce forests. A place where winter feels ancient, almost sentient. In the early 2020s, this was just a couple of years ago, a seasoned cross-country skier named Evan Marshall set out on a solo winter run of one of the region's remote trails. He'd skied the route dozens of times, knew the terrain, the weather patterns, and the wildlife. But on this particular day, the forest was different. Evan started his run just after sunrise. The air was crisp, the sky pale blue streaked with thin clouds. The snow was perfect, firm, wind-packed, with just enough give for smooth gliding. He settled into a steady rhythm, skis whispering across the surface, poles tapping in a familiar cadence. For the first few miles, everything felt normal, peaceful, predictable. Then the forest went quiet. Not gradually, suddenly. That's bad, like it flipped a switch.
Good.
The distant crack of ice, the soft rustle of wind through the branches, even the faint call of winter birds, it all stopped. The silence was so abrupt it made Evan slow his pace, glancing around with a frown. And that's when he heard it, a footfall in the trees. Not the scurry of a hare, not the bounding of a fox, not the 4-beat pattern of a moose, a single, heavy, 2-legged step. Then Evan stopped, the sound stopped. He waited, breath fogging in the cold air, and nothing happened. He pushed off again, skis gliding smoothly, and a moment later he heard it again. Step, step, step. The cadence matched his own. Evan's pulse quickened. He slowed his pace, and the footsteps slowed. He quickened his pace, and the footsteps quickened their pace. A kind of synchronized pacing is referenced in multiple winter stories and hiker reports in Alaska. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an echo. Maybe it was the sound of his own skis bouncing off the trees. But the footsteps weren't rhythmic like the skis. They were heavy, deliberate, and organic. He skied faster. The footsteps kept pace. Evan glanced into the trees, searching for movement. The forest was dense, shadows layered between the trunks, but he saw nothing. No shape, no silhouette, no flash of fur. Just darkness. He tried to ignore it, focusing on his breathing, his stride, and the familiar rhythm of the trail. But the footsteps stayed with him, always just out of sight, always matching his pace perfectly. After nearly a mile of this, Evan's nerves were getting frayed. He stopped abruptly, turning toward the sound. Dead silence. The forest stared back at him, still and indifferent. He waited and listened, but nothing happened. So he pushed off again. The footsteps returned instantly. Step, step, step. This time, they were closer. Evan felt a surge of adrenaline. He skied faster, pushing himself hard, breath burning in his lungs. The trail curved along a ridge, the trees thinned slightly, and he risked a glance to his right. For a split second, he saw movement. A dark shape between the trees, tall, broad, and keeping pace effortlessly. Then it was gone. Evan's heart hammered in his chest. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. He skied as fast as he could, the trail blurring beneath him. The footsteps stayed with him. Not chasing, not closing the distance, just following. Matching him, studying him. Finally, after nearly 3 miles of this silent pursuit, the trail opened into a clearing, a wide, snow-covered meadow where the trees fell away and the sky expanded overhead. The footsteps stopped. Evan skied into the open space, chest heaving, sweat freezing on his skin, and he turned slowly, scanning the tree line. There was nothing there. No movement, no sound, no silhouette, just empty forest. He waited several minutes before skiing to the edge of the clearing, and that's when he saw the tracks. They were enormous. Each print was easily 18 inches long, spaced far apart, with a depth that said if something was heavy. The stride length was nearly 6 feet. The tracks paralleled the trail for nearly a mile, always just inside the tree line and always matching his pace. Evan followed them for a short distance. They continued in a straight line until they just didn't anymore. Just like every other episode where we've talked about this. The final print, then untouched snow. No sign of a jump, no distance, no disturbance, no collapse of the crust, just clean termination. Evan backed away slowly, scanning the forest for movement, but the woods were silent, still, and watching. He skied the rest of the trail without stopping. He didn't return to that route again. He told the story a while later to a researcher, and it was included in an Alaskan collection of encounter stories. And he also never ran alone in the White Mountains again.
Dude. No, thank you.
Yeah, we hear a lot of stories about them pacing people out of the woods or just following hikers and things like that. So, yeah. But cross-country skiers can cover a lot of territory pretty quick.
Yeah,
and it was keeping up with him easily.
I mean, it's honestly for every 2 or 3, shh of him doing like that, it was probably like bloop, bloop, as big as its pace was, or his stride was.
Yeah, that it matched his pace so easily is a little off-putting.
Yeah, I mean the fact that he was like, it's probably like I don't want to look, but I'm gonna anyway. And he saw this big shape just keeping pace with him. I would have been like, I don't know, man. I think I might quicken my pace just a smidge.
Judy McKee Smith says I wouldn't be looking for footprints. I'd be on my way home.
I'd be looking for a change of shorts. You know what I mean?
Doc would be unzipping his snowsuit and shaking it out.
Yeah. You ain't lying, man. That is scary, dude. Wow.
Thanks, Boondock. He said I emailed you the video of the Alaskan telling the story about the polar bear. I'll check that out after the show. Thanks.
Well, it's like Arlen just said. They don't like us being in their living room. What are you doing here? True story.
Very much so. But again, similarities.
Yeah. Print size, stride size, the observation and pacing. It never made, it never made direct contact. It was just like, I'd be, it's like the Phantom of the Opera. I'd be in the back, I'll be back here just watching you.
Right. And clearly if it was keeping up easily, it could have caught him easily.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're no match, dude. We're no match. If we're running, we're just fast food.
It'd be like my 55-year-old butt trying to arm wrestle the guy that played the mountain on the throne on Game of Thrones. Yeah. Like, I can take him. As he dislocates my arm and beats me with it.
Exactly. I didn't know your arm could turn that way.
That's right. Me either.
I didn't either.
Weren't designed that way.
Yeah.
Look at all that room he made for my new prosthetic.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the way he moved defied physics. Yes, it does. Yeah, I mean, just like these creatures move so fast and so like what he was saying, it was effortless. It was just bloop, 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 keeping up with him. Like, oh, we're going out on a stroll, are we? As it was watching him. That's sobering, man. I mean, is this like there's a video of a girl who was skiing or snowboarding, and there was a brown bear chasing her behind her, and she was completely oblivious because she had her earbuds in. And that thing was keeping up some good speed with her. She was able to outrun it. I don't know that we could outrun one of those things, man, with a 6 to 8 to 12 foot stride.
No.
Imagine what their stride stretches out to when they're running.
You know what the speed of that thing makes me think, boys? Maybe we should invest in some 4-wheelers for when we go out.
Yeah, and don't cut your freaking engine off, dude.
Leave it idling.
Yeah, leave that sucker idling. We'll be all right.
So 9 encounter stories stretching over 5 decades across hundreds of miles of wilderness, and the same patterns repeat. Massive size, silent movement, trackways that vanish, deliberate pacing, watching cabins, dawn observations, parallel tracking, no vocalizations, no fear, and no mistakes. So, this is just... It's time to bring it all together. Let's kind of look at the unified theory of this, shall we? Doc, you want to take us into the unified theory?
100%, man. So if we're looking at these all of the things that happened for over 5 decades, the interior of Alaska has whispered the same unique story through different voices: trappers, hunters, state troopers, families, researchers, skiers. These are all credible people. and there's thousands of square miles that these are spread out across. The only separation is time and distance, but they all describe the same traits. And so what we say earlier, we were trying to establish patterns, and that's exactly what we've done. And when you lay these stories side by side, the pattern in them it's undeniable, man. I mean, it's the same type of creature, and something walks the winter, something that's built for the cold, something that moves with absolute silence, that something that big shouldn't be able to possess, and something that watches and evaluates and assesses and chooses its moments with a definite sentience, an unsettling intelligence. And so this is the cold adapted apex predator. It's the creature that we have come to call the Alaskan bush stalker. So
I agree with Lone Queen's comment. I think because the person who was there said he didn't see any sign of it jumping, doesn't mean that it wasn't, because in that one story he said the last tracks were smashed down deeper. I think they did, and we have no idea. She's right. We have no idea how far these things can jump.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because my brother Carly just sent me a text, and he said, "Why do you suppose the tracks just disappear?" That's very odd, to say the least. True, but that's like we were saying. Those tracks, we hadn't seen them, but we were hypothesizing that they're pressed down even further when something had hunkered down, squatted down, and then leapt up. And like that one dude even said, "I feel like I'm being watched from a vantage point that I can't see." And what would that vantage point be? In the tree line?
Up in the trees.
Up in the trees, yeah. So that's the only.
And something that's covered with a natural brown ghillie suit that can stand perfectly still. What color are tree trunks?
Brown. Yeah,
it could be hanging onto a big tree trunk, and you wouldn't even know it was there.
And also, if they've got the clear hair shafts, like we've seen in the video that I think it was MK Davis showed us, right?
Yeah, the Paul Freeman footage.
Yeah, where it just stopped, and all of a sudden you're like, "Where is it?" And all of a sudden it started moving, and you're like, "Oh, there it is." Nothing changed except it just stood stock still, and there it was. And there it wasn't.
Right. So across all nine encounters, there's certain physical traits that have aligned. A height of 8 to 10 feet, 17 to 18 inch tracks, 6 to 7 foot strides. Creature weighing hundreds of pounds, balanced upright, controlled in its movements, with long hanging arms that fall well below the waist, a slight forward head slope, and a silent, deliberate, and possibly smooth gait. It's not a human. It's not a bear. It's not a moose. So it's something else. Something evolved for existence in deep snow, brutal cold, and long distance travel.
Yeah. And the fact that the way it moves and everything like that, but not just the way it moves, but the fact that it doesn't behave like a bear. It doesn't behave like a big cat.
Right.
It doesn't behave like a wolf. It doesn't. One thing that's unlike the Pacific Northwest stuff stories that we've heard is one of the things they heard was what the deep resonating vocalizations, that rattled their their innards. It doesn't vocalize. Not in once of those 50 years of reports did anything vocalize.
Right.
It didn't attack. There's not one single confirmed aggression case. It's creepy, a little bit creepy, a little bit pervy, a little bit creepy, stalkery. You need to be put on some sort of profile or something, but nothing attacks. It doesn't run. It's just everything is said. It's watching. And then when it's ready to, what does it do?
It's just gone.
It's gone. It leaves. But it leaves at its own choice. It doesn't leave when anybody else, makes it leave. And it's definitely not hiding. I mean, it's putting itself out there on Front Street. And I think y'all said this too. the reason it puts us out there on Front Street, it doesn't hide. It wants people to know it's there as a territorial thing, saying, "Hey, dude, I'm right here. You're in my turf. You need to go." Just like that trapper. Like you hit it on the nose, DA. You too, Robbie. It was like that was a warning. That was that thing saying, "Hey, I'm here. I've been here before you. Time for you to leave." So, and everything it does is deliberate. You know, it's and that's the thing about it. Deliberate movement takes intelligence. You know what I mean? It's to me. I think that's why it says. I think it's a sentient being. It is definitely something that's apex watching us. I mean,
That's clearly intelligent.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think a polar bear would give that sucker a wide berth. You know what I mean?
If it's smart, it will.
Yeah, because I mean that's a very intelligent creature. So I don't know.
Robbie, you want to talk about the track termination stuff?
Yeah,
You're our track guy.
Yeah,
this is probably one of the most consistent and the most baffling at the same time. And it's a chilling pattern across all 9 encounters that we've read tonight, and some other encounters we've read before that. They begin normally. They're indicative of a large, massive creature. They all have consistently long stride patterns, and then all of a sudden they just abruptly stop. Most of the people are saying no signs of jump, which we've already discussed, that we think that probably that there is, and it's just not being because one guy even said that the prints were packed deeper at where they stopped, but still, other than that, no disturbances. There's no snow melt around the edge of the tracks, no wind scour, because loose powdered snow will work just like sand, and heavy wind can cause a trackway to shift side to side depending on which way the wind's blowing. And a trackway can move, several inches in high wind, but there was no sign of that. There was no terrain change, just that final print followed by untouched snow on past it. The phenomenon appears in the 70s in the Yukon cabin case, the 80s in the Koyukuk hunter case, the 1990s on the Denali Highway case, 2004 Fairbanks window case, the late 2000s Tanana River case, 2010 interior cabin watcher case, the 2006 in the Arctic Circle, 2018 the Dawn Trapper encounter, and this last one that we just read, the 2020s White Mountains runner. 9 encounters, 9 track terminations, all the same across 5 different decades. And with the 2000s having the most of those, there's one in the 70s, one in the 80s, one in the 90s, and then in the 2000s you get the other.
Oh, these are by far and away not all of the encounter stories.
No,
I picked the best 9.
I'm just talking about what we've got right here, given that estimation for what we got right here, and showing that over 5 different decades with 9 encounters spanning that whole decade, every one of those encounters are identical as far as the way the tracks were described, the way they terminated. So whatever the creature is, it knows how to erase its trail or backtrack or go to a certain spot and where it needs to be. Because like we say, this is this thing's living room. It's its bedroom. It's its house. If your lights are off and anybody's lights are off in their house, chances are you can move around your house because you know where everything's at, even if you can't see. So it knows where to go to get off the ground. So
yeah, it knows what trees will support its weight and which ones won't.
Right.
With that being said, we can probably say it moves in a way that we just don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it probably jumps much farther than we would think it could. Climbs far better than we could. It's adapted to its environment, and when those tracks disappear like that, I know there are going to be people that said they crossed dimensions or whatever, and again, I'm not going to say that's not possible. We know portals do exist. CERN opened one with the super collider, so portals do exist. But like we said before, it's highly improbable, and if a creature like that had the ability to walk through portals, and it's a big predator like this, it would be the dominant species on the planet, and there wouldn't be a dang thing we could do about it. It would pick and choose who and what it wanted to eat at will. So it's far more logical, it's far more believable to think that they're either backtracking and slipping off onto terrain where they can't be tracked, or they're going up a tree. That just makes more sense to me.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's one of the things that we've always tried to do with this show is we've tried to approach the phenomenon logically and from an evidence base. That comes from, between the group of us, 50 years of law enforcement experience and military experience as well, and we also try to explain things biologically. That's where Doc and Steve come in. Both of them have a medical background, a science background, so we try to approach all of this as logically as we possibly can, which is why we offer these explanations. And these explanations are our theories, folks. We haven't proven any of these, so your theories are just as valid as any of ours, but we're trying to present things in a logical fashion and present them with enough of a scientific footing that they ring true to you. Again, you guys can form your own opinions, make up your own minds about what the truth of the matter is. But that's been our goal, is to bring forth as much truth as we can to hopefully shed a big light on this subject. And this thing is perfectly adapted to using silence as a weapon. It doesn't make any sound. And when we look at that, like we're talking about the possible morphology of the foot being soft on the bottom, kind of like an elephant's foot. That doesn't mean it's weak or easy to cut, but it's malleable like the bottom of an elephant's foot. Elephant's foot will basically mold to its surrounding, mold to the surface as it walks. And I think that's what these things are doing, and that would explain why you don't hear a lot of noise when they walk, unless they want you to hear them. But it doesn't make it can walk silently on snow, on ice, in the trees, when walking around a tent, when crossing a highway, or just standing outside your window. This isn't luck. It's not a coincidence. It's an adaptation. It's a perfectly natural adaptation. A creature that can move silently in deep snow has a massive advantage over every other predator in the area. It can stalk without detection. It can observe without being heard, and it can approach cabins, tents, and trails without alerting anybody that it's there. Silence is its territory.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doc, what do you think about the intelligence level displayed by this?
I've said this many times. These things act like a sentient being. That means they have cognition. They are thinkers. They observe. You know what I mean? They assess, and that's a sign. That's a trait of an intelligent being. They're not just going to act on something. They're going to gather intel. They're going to gather that intelligence, that reconnaissance, circling cabins for hours, watching families. I mean, that thing stood stock still for an hour from the trees, did not move. Matching that dude's pace for miles as it was skiing, pacing him in the woods, and it stayed within the tree line. It never showed its hand. The one where it tilted his head at the trapper, before he disappeared in the shadow, is like, let me look at you again and see what's going on. And the whole, approaching windows directly, it wants to see what we're doing. You know what I mean? Testing those perimeters, just like in the first encounter, whenever it started out very far out from the cabin and it got closer and closer and closer until it was standing right outside the door.
So it allows itself to be seen when it wants to be seen, and then when it doesn't want to be seen, it's gone, man. And like I said, this isn't instinctual. This is not an instinctual thing. This is not a learn thing. This is actual. This shows cognition. This shows sentience. It shows intelligence. So it's a decision making process. So I think this is a smart creature, man. And I think people don't give it enough credit, to be quite honest with you. Because there's been stories of these creatures using tools and even others having armor. You know what I mean? So yeah, that shows a high degree of intelligence, even having their own language. And so I don't think people give them enough of credit. They just think there's some mindless rage creature or whatever. So yeah, they're smart. They're smarter than people give them credit for. I really believe that.
Robbie, what about territory? That winter is its domain.
Well, the encounters from a rough geographic triangle, the Yukon River, the Koyukuk River, the Tanana River, the outskirts of Fairbanks, White Mountain, and the Arctic Circle. It's not random. That's a range. And we've speculated on, we believe that they have a very big range. And you would have to, for something that size, to get the caloric intake that it would have to have. It's not going to stay in one little small area. I mean, we've talked about, a big mountain lion has a 260-mile range. So if this thing's 3 times the size of a mountain lion, you would expect it to have a much bigger range. A massive, sparsely populated region where it can adapt to a cold and become the apex and exist without detection, unless it wants to be detected, which in some of these cases we believe they wanted to be detected. Creature appears most often in deep winter with extreme cold. It's always silent, which is another distinction from some of the others that we've read. And Doc pointed that out earlier. There was absolutely no vocalization mentioned in any of these that we read tonight, and that's kind of telling too, is that it's a different. And it may be that, because the sound travels so much better in the cold area, they don't need to have a call like that, or they choose not to because they don't want something knowing where they're at. This is a very isolated area, like we've talked about, and it happens a lot during or near cabins, tents, and trails. And there again, the hoaxing thing. This is such a sparsely populated area. You can't expect that somebody's just out there hanging around in a suit, just hoping somebody's going to walk by. That's not like a part or a popular trail in a national park that that encounters with people would be on the rare side in those areas. And here again, we always talk about along frozen waterways. They always follow the water.
Right.
It moves like a migratory predator, like following that range that we've talked about, that we've theorized about. Seasonal patterns of the prey, whatever their main prey, moose, caribou, deer, elk, whatever it may be. And it avoids confrontation and prioritizes observation. Because there was, with the exception of the one in the tent, I don't think any of the rest of these were strictly predatorial. I think the one we talked about with the tent, that one probably was. It was probably trying to flush them out. But I don't think any of the rest of them were strictly predatorial. I think they were more observation, like Doc was talking about.
And something you just hit on something I didn't think about earlier. Where was that research team at? They were in the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where there is very, very little food. You know what I mean? So
yep.
It was probably trying to get what it could, because if we follow these migratory patterns, because if they stay in one area, they're going to deplete their food sources, right?
Right.
So they're going to go where the food is. But up there above the Arctic Circle, dude, it's barren.
Well, look at every other big predator on the planet. They don't live in one small area. They have a range. They have to, because like Doc said, if a big predator stays in one area too long, it's going to eat literally everything there is to eat in that area and starve.
Yep. Yeah. That I didn't until you said that, Robbie. I didn't even think about that. I was like, well, dang, the whole tent thing. That's because they were north of the Arctic Circle, and it's freaking desolate up there. So
right.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense right there. Yeah.
So all of this kind of combines to paint a unified picture. Yeah, a unified picture of what we're dealing with here. When you look at the consistency among these reports, the size, the stride, the silence, the intelligence, the track termination, the observation behavior, the territorial consistency, the adaptation to the cold, and a pattern over multiple decades, you get a creature that doesn't fit any other known species. Bears don't do that. Moose don't do that. Humans dang sure don't do that. It's not a primate. It's not a myth. It's something else. It's something that has evolved to live in a cold climate like that, something that thrives in the silence, something that watches from the tree line, something that moves through winter like it owns it, something that's been there far longer than we have.
100%.
So, to me, we're not talking about one creature over 50 years. This is indicative of a species.
Yeah.
It would have to be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the whole thing, the big thing with this is like what Robbie had said, and it could be, it's a species, but maybe it's a subset, because we saw some of the same types of behavior in Pacific Northwest, but these up north don't vocalize.
Well, look at regional variances in killer whales. Robbie was pointing that out. And on one ocean, we've got killer whales that hunt seals and penguins down by Antarctica. But then you've got others that have adapted to hunting sharks. Others that will hunt the calves of other whales. Mm-hmm. So each region, they've got their own particular adaptations and ways they hunt that are molded to that particular region.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. That's pretty cool. And the way they observe, and nothing up there is going to top them as far as being able to move through that terrain like they do. I mean, they're like the freaking, like the Robbie said too, they're the apex, because they really are.
Yeah.
Don says would think they would have a range of 1,000 to 2,000 miles. They'd have a big range, especially if they're a family unit. Even a mountain lion, who is typically a solo hunter, has a range of well over 200 miles. Right. And that's not uncommon. But for a large predator group like this that has to eat a lot to survive, unless they have a specifically different type of digestive system where they don't require as many calories. Right. We don't know. But regardless, a family group would still consume a considerable amount of food, and they would have to rove over an area much larger than typical for other predators, which is probably why we have our most encounter stories in Joe Bald and on that side of the lake in fall and in winter. But it was dead summer over in Combs Ferry that night, and we had a ton of activity over there, not hundreds of miles away, but on the opposite side of the lake. So if they're moving around that lake, tracking different hunting grounds and different food sources, Table Rock Lake in and of itself has over 750 miles of shoreline. That could easily become a home range for a group of creatures.
Absolutely.
And it would make sense why we see them in different types of the year on different parts of the lake.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. It's their migratory pattern.
Right. And I agree with Doc. They are clearly intelligent. way more intelligent than most folk would give them credit. But then again, so are dogs. Look how much smarter dogs are than people really give them credit. The dogs have emotions. Dogs understand words. They have a vocabulary. There are certain words, like if I said, I'll spell it out, Treat, because he's right there.
Yeah.
If I said the actual word, he'd be up here sniffing me.
That's the way this one is right here.
Or he'd go and sit by the bowl. He
Quinna
knows where they are.
could actually spell, because I could look at her and I'd say, "You want to take a Brake?" And she just look at me. I'd say, "You want to take a Break?" And
Yeah.
she knew the difference in spelling between brakes on a tire,
Funny.
or break as in let's go take a break, because that was her keyword to go use the bathroom. She's going to take a break.
That's funny, man. Yeah.
Well, if you think a dog can't count, go open up the treat bag, take out 3 treats and stick them in your pocket. Then only give him 2.
He like, what are you hiding, man? What you hiding?
Yeah, I saw 3. I smell 3. There's still something in your pocket. Fork it over.
Exactly. I know what you're doing, man. You're trying to hold out on me. Ain't that right, Doc? I ain't holding out on you, man. I give you all the treats. You keep me warm. He's good. He lays down by my feet at nighttime, keeps my feet warm.
But we're if we think this is just a dumb animal, we're selling it short. It is clearly intelligent.
Amen. Amen. Yeah.
So, out of these stories, boys, which one kind of stuck with you the most?
For me, I guess the Alaskan Trooper, because
Well, yeah, it could happen to you out on patrol.
Yeah.
I've been out there on those long, lonely nights, and especially when I first started, when you work in an entire city by yourself and you ain't got no help, you see something like that, you're like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. Clearly, you're not putting that in the report.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, otherwise you're going for a whiz quiz, as you say, DA.
That's right. Like, that's an interesting story. Why don't you go in the back room pee in this here cup?
Yeah, here's a cup to go pee in. I think for me it was the Trapper, to where the way that thing could have stayed hidden. I mean, the dude he knew everything went quiet, knew everything was going a little funky, but he was like, wait, what is that? And the thing stepped out and was like, here I am, and let him know he was there, did a little evaluation, and then just said, all right, deuces, and stepped back in the shadows and disappeared. And that was, to me, that was his,
Yeah.
It's time to get the heck up out of here, because
He abandoned his trap trail.
yeah, I mean, because that thing was just saying, hey, bro, that's my stuff. That's my territory. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think to me, that was very telling. And it didn't have to be aggressive. It was not overtly aggressive at all. It was just like, I'm right here. You're right there. I could be there if I wanted to be, because we're not that far apart.
Right. For me, the one that stuck with me the most is the one north of the Arctic Circle, where it paced around the tent because of the chilling similarities to the Dyatlov Pass incident.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really believe if they had panicked and ran from that tent, we never would have heard that story. Or it would be America's Dyatlov Pass story.
Yeah.
Yep.
That thing would have been sitting there going, all right, here they come, boys.
Y'all get ready. They're fixing to run.
Break out the salt and peppers. Who got the Tabasco? Who got the hot sauce? It's true, though. Yeah. That's a scary one. Scurry.
So, 9 different encounters, one distinctly similar type of creature, one pattern, and one truth. In the frozen silence of the Alaskan interior, something walks quietly and observes everything. The interior doesn't give warnings. It doesn't shout. It doesn't roar. It whispers. And if you've been listening tonight, I mean really listening, you've heard the same whisper echo through every story we've told. A cabin stalked for 3 nights. A hunter watched from across the ice. A silhouette crossing a highway in a whiteout blizzard. Tracks that led up to a living room window. A creature standing across a frozen river just watching. A figure standing in a tree line for over an hour just staring at the house. A tent circled until dawn. A trapper evaluated at first light by a creature standing just a few feet away. A skier who was followed for miles. 9 encounters, 5 decades, 1 presence. Something massive, something silent, and something that moves through the winter like it was born from the cold itself. And here's the part that should keep you awake tonight. It never attacked. It never fled. It never made a mistake. It just watched, it learned, and it chose. Predators don't behave like that. Animals don't behave like that. Only something that understands us, something that studies us, that behaves like that. So if you ever find yourself alone in the deep timber and the wind dies down, if the world goes still and the silence suddenly feels heavy, don't look toward the noise. Look toward the quiet. Because the thing that walks the winter doesn't crunch snow. It doesn't break branches. And it doesn't breathe loud enough for you to hear. It stands in the places where sound goes to die. It waits in the cold between heartbeats. It watches from the tree line, from the ridge, or from the edge of the frozen river. And when it decides to move, you won't hear it. Not until it's already too close. This has been the Nightmare Hunters, folks. And out here in the frozen dark of the Alaskan interior, the silence isn't empty. It's occupied. So, boys, this was an awesome evening. I really enjoyed these stories.
Me too.
But before we go, we do have the usual business. We got to talk about our good and awesome affiliates. And the first affiliate is right here beneath me. Doc, would you mind telling us a little bit about Dark Angel Medical?
Yeah. So if you head over to www.darkangelmedical.com, we have a wide variety of medical products from anywhere from your vehicle to your European shoulder bag, your man purse, your satchel. And we also offer training on how to use that information, how to use those products, give you the information. And so we, all of our products are HSA, FSA approved, eligible. And if you ever utilize one of our products to save someone's life, we will be happy to replace whatever you have used and doing that. And if you use the coupon code cryptid20, that will take 20% off of your order. Now, we don't make we don't have a lot of markup on this stuff, folks. Never going to be a millionaire, but you can't put a value on a human life because, like I always say, we put birthdays in the boxes. And so far, I've put 211 birthdays into boxes over the last 15 years. And that is something you can't put a monetary value to. So head over to darkangelmedical.com, get that kit, get trained, and be the difference.
Robbie, you want to tell us a little bit about the good folks over at Scallywag Tactical?
Scallywag Tactical is another one of our veteran-owned affiliates. Make some of the best blades that you can get your hands on. Always coming out with new blades. Sometimes they'll get rid of the ones that you really like, but they're always going to come out with something just as good, if not better. Go check them out. Use discount code DA Roberts 10 at checkout. Get yourself 10% off your order. Tell them we sent you. You won't be surprised, or you won't be disappointed. You'll love them.
Absolutely. And lastly, check out the good folks over at SigwoArms.com. Sigwo Arms is a locally owned here in Springfield, Missouri, firearms manufacturer that they produce their own ammunition as well, and you can get some fantastic deals. It's a veteran-owned company. Sigwo is actually a tribute to that. The guy who founded the company was a warrant officer in the Army who happened to work in signals, thus Sigwo. Signal's more an officer. They founded an awesome company, and they make some fantastic products. And if you want to get a Codename Wild Hunt or Dark Frontiers engraved pew pew for somebody that enjoys that series, or the gun enthusiast in your group, reach out to them. You can reach them at sigwoarms.com. Talk to either of the Codys, and they'll hook you up. And they're the only ones licensed to put those out. And you can get some fantastic deals on Freedom Seeds, aka ammunition. They've always got good deals going on because they produce it in-house themselves. And now that the tax stamp issue has been sorted out, you can also get your whisper pickles, or suppressors, as whisper pickles as I like to call them. But you can get those there as well, and you won't have to pay a tax stamp, and they'll ship to anywhere with an FFL. So check them out, let them know we sent you, and check out their awesome stuff. And don't forget to use discount code Bigfoot5 for 5% off your entire order. And believe me, that does add up pretty fast. But if you're a veteran or active duty military or a first responder, let them know that, and they actually bump that to 10% off. So again, check them out. Awesome company, fantastic group of people, and tell them we sent you. One of the things I always want to talk about before we shut her down is the 22 a day foundation. We lose 22 veterans a day to suicide, and that is 22 too many. Although recent research shows that that number may be as low as 17 a day, but again, still 17 too many. So reach out to your friends and family that are first responders. Reach out to anybody you know that served in any capacity. The veteran from whatever branch of service, because as the old saying goes, all gave some and some gave all, and some are still fighting those battles. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the old Charlie Daniels song, Still in Saigon, but that song is about a man struggling with PTSD from the war in Vietnam. And PTSD is a silent killer, folks. It's worse than a heart attack because it's something that can be fought, and a lot of times these veterans and these first responders fight it alone, and you shouldn't. Reach out to somebody. Let them know you're thinking about them. Let them know you care, because nobody should have to face that demon alone. And let's get 22 a day down to 0 where it needs to be. So as we wind her down and we're getting ready to head her out, we close her out with a toast. And it's something I'm pretty proud of, something I've been happy that we've been doing. And Doc, you want to take us out tonight?
Sure. All right, this is from an Irish drinking song called The Parting Glass. Goes like this. But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call. Good night and joy be to you all. Slanjava. See y'all next time.
Slanjava. We'll see you guys on Saturday.
Plains, the winds are howling, saloon doors swinging, shadows growling. 3 lawmen stand tough as rawhide. Yeah, Doc and DA, nothing can abide. Whiskey shots and poker faces, staring down the darkest spaces in this town where legends roam. These boys bring justice, sending evil home. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and rains. Cryptid lawmen, a fearsome sight, standing tall against the endless night. Jed's a howler, claws of steel, Doc's a biter, makes a devil real. But DA's a shifty, want a shape-shifting soul, can turn to anything, takes any form, takes control. Tonight the chupacabras come to town, sucking the life from all around. But these lawmen, they ain't afraid, they'll face the darkness unafraid. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the against the endless night. Bat wings flap, the air grows cold, a chill and trap. But these lawmen, they're ready to fight underneath the pale moonlight. Jet and Doc transform with a howl. DA shifts, becomes a night owl. Together they stand, a force so strong against the evil right in the wrong. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and rains. Cryptid lawmen, a fearsome sight, standing tall against the endless